Heyo, Tensagi here. I'm doing something very different in this stream. Normally I stream and upload gaming videos, but this time I'm going to try a reading ASMR. As you can see, I will be reading the book Redwall by Jacques. It's a book that I read a lot when I was younger, so it's nostalgic for me. But perhaps it is new to you. I will be starting Book 1 of Redwall, The Wall. Chapter 1. Matthias cut a comical little figure as he wobbled his way along the cloisters, with his large sandals flip-flopping and his tail peeping from beneath the baggy folds of an oversized novice's habit. He paused to gaze upwards at the cloudless blue sky, and tripped over the enormous sandals. Hazelnuts scattered out upon the grass from the rush basket he was carrying. Unable to stop, he went tumbling, cowl over tail. Bump! The young mouse squeaked in dismay. He rubbed tenderly at his damp snub nose, while slowly taking stock of where he had landed, directly at the feet of Abbot Mortimer. Immediately Matthias scrambled about on all fours, hastily trying to stuff nuts back into the basket as he muttered clumsy apologies, avoiding the stern gaze of his elder. "You're sorry, Father Abbot. I tripped, you see. Trod on my abbot, Father Abbot. Oh dear, I mean." The Father Abbot blinked solemnly over the top of his glasses. Matthias again. What a young buffoon of a mouse. Only the other day he had singed old Brother Methuselah's whiskers while lighting candles. The elder's stern expression softened. He watched the little novice rolling about on the grass, grappling with large armfuls of the smooth hazelnuts, which constantly seemed to escape his grasp. Shaking his old gray head, yet trying to hide a smile, Abbot Mortimer bent and helped to gather the fallen nuts. "Oh, Matthias, Matthias, my son," he said wearily. "When will you learn to take life a little slower, to walk with dignity and humility? How can you ever hope to be accepted as a mouse of Redwall when you are always dashing about, grinning from whisker to tail like a mad rabbit?" Matthias tossed the last of the hazelnuts into the basket, and stood awkwardly shuffling his large sandals in the grass. How could he say aloud what was in his heart? The abbot put his paw around the young mouse's shoulder, sensing his secret yearnings, for he had ruled Redwall wisely over a great number of years, and gained much experience of mouse life. He smiled down at his young charge and spoke kindly to him. "Come with me, Matthias. It is time we talked together." A curious thrush perching in a gnarled pear tree watched the two figures make their way at a sedate pace in the direction of the great hall, one clad in the greeny brown of the order, the other garbed in the lighter green of a novice. They conversed earnestly in low tones. Thinking what a clever bird he was, the thrush swooped down on the basket that had been left behind. Twisters! The basket contained only hard nuts, locked tight within their shells. Feigning a lack of interest, lest any other birds had been witness to his silly mistake, he began whistling jauntily a few bars of his melodious summer song, strolling nonchalantly over to the cloister walls in search of snails. It was cool inside the great hall. Sunlight flooded down in slanting rainbow-hued shafts from the high, narrow stained-glass windows. A million covered dust motes danced and swirled as the two mice trod the ancient stone floor. The Father Abbot halted in front of the wall, on which hung a long tapestry. This was the pride and joy of Redwall. The oldest part had been woven by the founders of the abbey, but each successive generation had added to it. Thus the tapestry was not only a priceless treasure, It also had a magnificent chronicle of early redwall history. I'm pausing for a brief moment to take a drink.
Try it today.
The abbot studied at the wonderment in Matthias's eyes as he asked him a question, the answer to which the wise mouse already knew. "What are you looking at, my son?" Matthias pointed to the figure woven into the tapestry. It was a heroic-looking mouse, with a fearless smile on his handsome face. Clad in armor, he leaned casually on an impressive sword, while behind him foxes, wildcats, and vermin fled in terror. The young mouse gazed in admiration. "Oh, hi, Faded." My viewer Faded just showed up. I'll now continue the story. "Oh, Father Abbot," he sighed. "If only I could be like Martin the warrior. He was the bravest, most courageous mouse that ever lived." The abbot sat down slowly on the cool stone floor, resting his back against the wall. "Listen to what I say, Matthias. You have been like a son to me ever since you first came to our gates as an orphaned woodland mouse, begging to be taken in. Come sit by me and I will try to explain to you what our order is all about. We are mice of peace. Oh, I know that Martin was a warrior mouse, but those were wild days when strength was needed, the strength of a champion such as Martin. He arrived here in the deep winter when the founders were under attack from many foxes. Pardon me, I lost track for a second. He arrived here in the deep winter when the founders were under attack from many foxes, vermin, and a great wildcat. So fierce a fighter was Martin that he faced the enemy single pod, driving them mercilessly far from Mossflower. During the rout, Martin fought a great battle against overwhelming odds. He emerged victorious after slaying the wildcat with his ancient sword, which became famous throughout the land. But in the last bloody combat, Martin was seriously wounded. He lay injured in the snow until the mice found him. They brought him back to the abbey and cared for his hurts until he regained his strength. Then something seemed to come over him. He was transformed by what could only be called a mouse miracle. Martin forsook the way of the warrior and hung up his sword. That was when our order found its true vocation. All the mice took a solemn vow to never harm another living creature, unless it was an enemy that sought to harm our order by violence. They vowed to heal the sick, care for the injured, and give aid to the wretched and impoverished. So was it written, and so has it been through all the ages of mousekind since. Today we are deeply honored and highly respected. I missed a word. It's trickier reading on a stream or video than I thought it would be. Today we are a deeply honored and highly respected society. Anywhere we go, even far beyond Mossflower, we are treated with courtesy by all creatures. Even predators will not harm a mouse who wears the habit of our order. They know he or she is the one who will heal and give aid. It is an unwritten law that redwall mice can go anywhere, through any territory, and pass unharmed. At all times we must live up to this. It is our way, our very life. As the abbot spoke, his voice increased in volume and solemnity. Matthias sat under his stern gaze, completely humbled. Abbot Mortimer stood and put a wrinkled old paw lightly on the small head, right between the velvety ears, now drooping with shame. Once more the abbot's heart softened towards the little mouse. Poor Matthias, alas for your ambitions. The day of the warrior is gone, my son. We live in peaceful times, thank heaven, and you need only think of obeying me, your abbot, and doing as you are bidden. In the time to come, when I am long gone to my rest, you will think back to this day and bless my memory, for then you will be a true member of Redwall. Come now, my friend, cheer up. It is summer of the late rose. There are many, many days of warm sun ahead of us. Go back and get your basket of hazelnuts. Tonight we will have a great feast to celebrate. My golden jubilee is abbot. When you've taken the nuts to the kitchen, I have a special task for you. Yes, indeed, I'll need some fine fish for the table. Get your rod and line. Tell Brother Elf that he is to take you fishing in the small boat. That's what young mice like doing, isn't it? Who knows, you may land a fine trout or some sticklebacks. Run along now, young one. Happiness filled Matthias from tail to whiskers as he bobbed a quick bow to his superior and shuffled off. Smiling benignly, the abbot watched him go. Little rascal, he must have a word with the almoner to see if some sandals could be found that were the right fit for Matthias. Small wonder the poor mouse kept tripping up. And that is the end of chapter 1. I need another sip of water before I read the next chapter. Chapter 2. The high, warm sun shone down on Clooney the Scourge. Clooney was coming. He was big and tough, an evil rat with ragged fur and curved, jagged teeth. He wore a black eye patch. His eye had been torn out in a battle with the pike. Clooney had lost an eye. The pike had lost its life. Some said that Clooney was a Portuguese rat. Others said he came from the jungles far across the wide oceans. Nobody knew for sure. Clooney was a bilge rat, the biggest, most savage rodent that ever jumped from ship to shore. He was black, with gray and pink scars all over his huge, sleek body, from the tip of his wet nose up past his green and yellow slitted eye, across both his main tattered ears, down the length of his heavy, vermin-ridden back to the enormous whip-like tail which had earned him his name, or earned him his title, Clooney the Scourge. I can read just fine until I'm on streams or videos. Now he rode on the back of the hay wagon with his 500 followers, a mighty army of rats, sewer rats, tavern rats, water rats, dockside rats. Clooney's army, fearing yet following him. Redtooth, his second in command, carried a long pole. This was Clooney's personal standard. The skull of a ferret was fixed at its top. Clooney had killed the ferret. He feared no living thing. Wild-eyed, with the terror of rat smell in its nostrils, the horse plunged ahead without any driver. Where the hay cart was taking him was of little concern to Clooney. Straight on the panic horse galloped, past the milestone lodged in the earth at the roadside, heedless of the letters graven in the stone. Redwall Abbey, 15 miles. Clooney spat over the edge of the cart at 2 young rabbits playing in a field. Tasty little things, a pity the cart hadn't stopped yet, he thought. The high, warm sun shone down on Clooney the Scourge. Clooney was a god of war. Clooney was coming nearer. And that is the end of chapter 2. Take another drink. I haven't done ASMR before, and I also have some difficulty reading sometimes, because I read way faster in my head than I do out loud, which causes my mind to be ahead of where my voice is. just slightly nervous because I'm doing something new. I was also slightly nervous when I first started streaming games. Chapter 3. Beneath the great hall of Redwall, candles burned bright in their sconces. This was the cavern hole of mice. What a night it was going to be. Between them, Matthias and Brother Elf had caught and landed a fully grown grayling. They had fought and played the big fish for nearly 2 hours, finally wading into the shallows and dragging it to the bank. It was nearly 2 pounds in weight, a tribute to Brother Elf's angling skills combined with the youthful muscles of Matthias and the joint enthusiasm. Constance the Badger had to be called. Gripping the fish in her strong jaws, she followed the 2 mice to the abbey kitchen and delivered the catch for them. Then she made her farewells. They would see her at the Jubilee feast that evening, along with many other Mossflower residents who had been invited to share the festivities. Brother Elf and Matthias stood proudly beside their catch amid the culinary hustle and bustle, until they were noticed by Friar Hugo. Busy as he was, the enormously fat Hugo, who would have no other title but that of friar, stopped what he was doing, wiping the perspiration from his brow with the dandelion that he held with his tail. He waddled about inspecting the fish. Nice shiny scales, bright eyes, beautifully fresh. Friar Hugo smiled so joyfully that his face disappeared amid the deep dimples. He shook Elf by the paw and clapped Matthias heartily on the back as he called out between chuckles, "Bring some white gooseberry wine, fetch me some roseberry, thyme, beech nuts, and honey, quickly. And now, friends, now," he squeaked, waving the dandelion wildly with his tail, "I, Hugo, will create a grayling a la redwall, such as will melt in the mouth of mice. Fresh cream, I need lots of fresh cream. Bring some mint leaves, too." They had left Friar Hugo ranting on, delirious in his joy, as they both went off to bathe and clean up, combing whiskers, curling tails, shining noses, and the 101 other grooming tasks that Redwall mice always performed in preparation for an epic feast. The rafters of the cavern hole rang to the excited buzz and laughter of the assembled creatures. Hedgehogs, moles, squirrels, woodland creatures, and mice of all kinds, field mice, hedge mice, dormice, and even a family of poor little church mice. Kindly helpers scurried about, making everybody welcome. "Hello there, Mrs. Church Mouse. Sit the children down. I'll get them some raspberry cordial. Why, Mr. Pinkful, so nice to see you. How's the back? Better now? Good. Here, try a drop of this peach and elderberry brandy." Matthias's young head was in a whirl. He could not remember being so happy in all his life. Winifred the otter nudged him. "I say, Matthias, where's this giant grayling that you and old Elf hooked by the claw? I wish I could land a beauty like that. Nearly a 2-pounder, wasn't it?" Matthias swelled with pride. Such praise, and from the champion fisher herself, an otter. Tim and Tess, the twin church mouse babes, felt Matthias's strong arm muscles and giggled aloud in admiration. He helped to serve them 2 portions of apple and mint ice cream. Such nice little twins. Was it only 3 months ago that he had helped Sister Stephanie to get them over tail rickets? How they had grown. Abbot Mortimer sat in his carved willow chair, beaming thanks as one by one the new arrivals laid their simple homemade gifts at his feet: an acorn cup from a squirrel, fishbone combs from the otters, mossy bark sandals made by the moles, and many more fine presents too numerous to mention. The abbot shook his head in amazement. Even more guests were arriving. Had to take another little sip of water. He beckoned Friar Hugo to his side. A whispered conference was held. Matthias could only hear snatches of the conversation. "Don't worry, Father Abbot, there will be enough for all. How are the cellar stocks, Hugo? Enough to flood the Abbey pond, Father. And nuts, we must not run short of nuts. You name them, we've got them, even candied chestnuts and acorn crunch. We could feed the district for a year. Dairy produce? Oh, that. I've got it. Cheddar cheese that 4 badgers couldn't roll, plus 10 other varieties. Good, thank you, Hugo. Oh, we must thank Elf and young Matthias for that magnificent fish. What fine anglers they are. There's enough to keep the entire abbey going for a week." "Excellent mice, well done." Matthias blushed to his tail's end. The otters, the otters!" A loud, jolly cry went up as 3 otters in clown costumes came bounding in. Such acrobatics! They tumbled, balanced, gyrated, cavorting comically across the laden tabletops without upsetting as much as a single sultana. They ended up hanging from the rafters by a strand of ivy to wild applause. Ambrose Spike the hedgehog did his party piece. He amazed everyone with his feats of legerdemain. Eggs were taken from a squirrel's ear, a young mouse's tail stood up and danced like a snake. The incredibly vanishing shell trick was performed in front of a group of little harvest mice who kept squeaking. "He's got it hidden in his prickles, but had he?" Ambrose made a few mysterious passes and produced the shell straight out of the mouth of an awestruck infant mouse. Was it magic? Of course it was. All activity ceased as the great Joseph bell tolled out 8 o'clock from the abbey belfry. Silently all creatures filed to their allotted places. They stood reverently behind the seats, with all heads lowered. Abbot Mortimer rose and solemnly spread his paws wide, encompassing the festive board. He said the grace. "Fern, whisker, tooth and claw, all who enter by our door, nuts and herbs, leaves and fruits, berries, tubers, plants and roots, silverfish whose life we take only for a meal to make." This was followed by a loud grateful amen. There was a mass clattering of chairs and scraping of forms as everyone was seated. Matthias found himself next to Tim and Tess on one paw and Cornflower Field Mouse on the other. Cornflower was a quiet young mouse, but undoubtedly very pretty. She had the longest eyelashes Matthias had ever seen, the brightest eyes, the softest fur, the whitest teeth. Matthias fumbled with a piece of celery self-consciously turned to see if the twins were coping adequately. You never could tell with these baby church mice. Brother Alf remarked that Friar Hewer had excelled himself, as course after course was brought to the table. Tender freshwater shrimp garnished with cream and rose leaves, deviled barley, pearls and acorn puree, apple and carrot chews, marinated cabbage stalks steeped in creamed white turnip with nutmeg. A course of oohs and ahs greeted the arrival of 6 mice, pushing a big trolley. It was the grayling. Wreaths of aromatic steam drifted around the cavern hole. The fish had been baked to perfection. Friar Hugo entered with a slight swagger added to his ungainly waddle. He swept off his chef's hat with his tail and announced in a somewhat pompous squeak, "My Lord Abbot, honored guests from Redwall area and members of the Abbey. I wish to present my piece de resistance." "Oh, get on with it, Hugo." After some icy staring, about to detect the culprit, and several smothered snickers from around the room, the fat little friar puffed himself up once more and declaimed firmly, "Grayling a la Redwall." Polite but eager applause ripped around as Hugo sliced the fish and placed the first steaming portion onto a platter. With suitable dignity, he presented it to the abbot, who thanked him graciously. All eyes were on the Father Abbot. He took a dainty fork, loaded precariously with steaming fish. Carefully he transferred it from plate to mouth. Chewing delicately, he turned his eyes upwards, then closed them, whiskers a-twitch, jaws working steadily, munching away. his tail curled up, holding a napkin which neatly wiped his mouth. The abbot's eyes reopened. He beamed like the sun on midsummer morn. Quite wonderful, perfectly exquisite. Friar Hugo, you are truly my champion chef. Please serve our guests your masterwork. Any further speech was drowned by hearty cheers. Water break. On to Chapter 4. Clooney was in a foul temper. He snarled viciously. The horse had stopped from sheer exhaustion. He hadn't wanted that. Some inner devil persuaded him that he had not yet reached his destination. Clooney's one eye slitted evilly. From the depths of the hay cart the rodents of the warlord's army snatched their master. They knew him well enough to stay clear of him in this present mood. He was violent, unpredictable. Skullface, so Clooney snapped. There was a rustle in the hay. A villainous head popped up. Hey, Chief, do you want me? Clooney's powerful tail shot out and dragged the unfortunate forward. Skullface cringed as sharp, dirty claws dug into his fur. Clooney nodded at the horse. Jump on that thing's back sharpish. Give it a good bite. That'll get the lazy brute moving again. Skullface swallowed nervously and licked his dry lips. But Chief, it might bite me back. Swish, crack. Clooney wielded his mighty tail as if it were a bullwhip. His victim screamed aloud with pain as the scourge lashed his thin bony back. Mutiny, insubordination, Clooney roared. By the teeth of hell, I'll flay you into mangy dull rags. Skullface scurried over onto the driver's seat, yelling with pain, No more, don't whip me, Chief. Look, I'm going to do it. Hold tight to the rigging back there, Clooney shouted to his horde. Skullface performed a frantic leap. He landed on the horse's back. The terrified animal did not wait for the rat to bite. As soon as it felt the loathsome scratching weight descend on its exposed haunches, it gave a loud, panicked whinny and bucked. Spurred on by the energy of fright, it carried off like a runaway juggernaut. Skullface had time for just one agonized scream before he fell. The iron-shod cartwheels rolled over him. He lay in a red mist of death, the life ebbing from his broken body. The last thing he saw before darkness claimed him was the sneering visage of Clooney the Scourge roaring from the jolting backboard. Tell the devil Clooney sent you, Skullface. They were on the move again. Clooney was getting nearer. That's the end of Chapter 4. I'll get another drink of water and then I'll read one more chapter. Chapter 5. Down in Cavern Hole, the great feast had slackened off. So had a lot of belts, redwall mice and their guests, set back, replete. There were still great quantities of food uneaten. Abbot Mortimer whispered in Friar Hugo's ear, Friar, I want you to pack up a large sack with food, hazelnuts, cheese bread, cakes, anything you see fit. Give it to Mrs. Churchmouse as secretly as you can without attracting attention. I had to sneeze. Poverty is an ugly specter when a housewife has many mouths to feed as she does. Well, and be sure that her husband doesn't suspect what you're doing. John Churchmouse may be poor, but he is also proud. I fear he might not accept charitable gifts. Hugo nodded knowingly and waddled off to do his abbot's bidding. Cornflower and Matthias had become quite friendly. They were young mice of the same age. Though their temperaments were different, they found something in common, an interest in Tim and Tess, the twin church mice. They had passed a pleasant evening, joking and playing games with the little creatures. Tess had clambered onto Matthias's lap and fallen into sleep, whereupon baby Tim did likewise in the velvety fur of Cornflower. She smiled at Matthias as she stroked Tim's small head. Oh, bless their little paws, don't they look peaceful? Matthias nodded contentedly in agreement. Colin Vole tittered aloud and remarked rather foolishly, "Ooh, would you look at Matthias and Cornflower over there nursing those two babies, like they was an old wedded couple, will crumble my bank." Brother Elf reprimanded him sharply. "Here now, you keep a latch on that silly tongue of yours, Colin Vole. Don't you know that someday Matthias will be a redwall mouse? And don't let me hear you slandering young Cornflower. She's a decent mouse from a good family. Mark my words, Master Vole, I could say a thing or two to your mum and dad. Only last evening I saw you playing catch the bulrush with that young harvest mouse. What was her name now?" Colin Vole blushed until his nose went dry. He flounced off, swishing his tail, muttering about going outside to take the air. Matthias caught a nod and a glance from the abbot. Excusing himself to Cornflower, he deposited the sleeping Tess gently upon his chair, and went across to him. "Ah, Matthias, my son, here you are. Did you enjoy my Jubilee feast?" "Yes, thank you, Father," Matthias replied. "Good, good," chuckled the abbot. "Now I was going to ask Brother Elf or Edmund to go on a special errand, but they are no longer young mice, and both look quite weary at this late hour. So I thought I might ask my chief grayling catcher to carry out the special task for me." Matthias could not help standing a bit taller. "Say the word and I'm your mouse, sir." The abbot leaned forward and spoke confidentially. "Do you see the church mouse family? Well, it's such a long way back home for them on foot. Good heavens, and there are so many of them. I thought it would be a splendid idea if you were to drive them home in the Abbey cart, along with any others going that way. Constance Badger would pull the cart, of course, while you would act as a guide and bodyguard. Take a good stout staff with you, Matthias." The young mouse needed no second bidding. Drawing himself up to his full height, he saluted in a smart military fashion. "Leave it to me, Father Abbot. Old Constance is a bit slow-thinking. I'll take complete responsibility." The abbot shook with silent laughter as he watched Matthias march off with a soldier-like swagger. Flip-flop, flip-flop, he tripped and fell flat on his tail. "Oh dear, I'll have to get that young mouse some sandals that aren't so big," the abbot said to himself for the second time that day. Well, what a stroke of luck. Fancy Cornflower's family living so close to the church mouse brood. Matthias was only too glad to offer them a lift home. Would Miss Cornflower like to sit next to him? She most certainly would. Cornflower's parents sat inside the cart, her mum helping Mrs. Church Mouse with the little ones, while her dad chatted away with John Church Mouse as they shared a pipe of old bracken twist. Friar Hugo came out and dumped a bulky sack next to Mrs. Church Mouse. "Abbot says to thank you for the loan of bowls and tablecloths, ma'am." The fat friar gave her a huge wink. "All comfy back there?" called Matthias. "Right, off we go, Constance." The big badger trundled the cart away as they called their goodnights. She nodded at Methuselah, the ancient gatekeeper mouse, as the cart rolled out into the road. A sliver of golden moon looked down from a star-pierced summer night. Matthias gazed upwards, feeling as if he were slowly turning with the silent earth. Peace was all about him. The baby mice inside the cart whimpered fitfully in their small secret dreams. Constance ambled slowly along as though she were out on a nighttime stroll, pulling no weight at all. The stout ash staff lay forgotten on the footboard. Cornflower dozed against Matthias's shoulder. She could hear the gentle lull of her father's voice and that of John Church Mouse, blending with the hum of nocturnal insects from the meadow and the hedges on this balmy summer night. The summer of the late rose. Cornflower turned the words over in her mind, dreamily thinking of the old rambler that bloomed in the Abbey gardens. Normally it was in full red flower by now, but this year, for some unknown reason, it had chosen to flower late. It was covered in dormant young rosebuds, even now, well into June, a thing that happened only infrequently and usually heralded an extra long, hot summer. Old Methuselah could only remember 3 other such summers in his long lifetime. Accordingly, he had advised that it be marked on the calendar and in the Abbey Chronicles as the summer of the late rose. Cornflower's head sank lower in sleep. The old carts rolled on gently down the long dusty road. They were now over halfway to the ruined church of St. Ninian, where John Church-Mouse lived, as had his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather before him. Matthias had fallen into a deep slumber. Even Constance was unable to stop her eyelids drooping. She went slower and slower. It was as if the little cart and its occupants were caught in the magic spell of an enchanted summer night. Suddenly and without warning, they were rustled by the thunder of hooves. Nobody could determine which direction the sound was coming from. It seemed to fill the very air about them as it gathered momentum. The ground began trembling with the rumbling noise. Some sixth sense warned Constance to get off the road to a hiding place. The powerful badger gave a mighty heave. Her blunt claws churned the roadside soil as she propelled the cart through a gap in the hawthorn hedge, down to the slope of the ditch where she dug her paws in, holding the cart still and secure while John Church-Mouse and Cornflower's father jumped out and wedged the wheels firmly with stones. Matthias gasped with shock as a giant horse galloped past, its mane streaming out, eyes rolling in panic. It was towing a hay cart which bounced wildly from side to side. Matthias could see rats among the hay, but these were no ordinary rats. They were huge, ragged rodents, bigger than any he had ever seen. Their heavy tattooed arms waved a variety of weapons, pikes, knives, spears, and long, rusty cutlasses. Standing boldly on the back board of the hay cart was the biggest, fiercest, most evil-looking rat that ever slunk out of a nightmare. In one claw he grasped a long pole with a ferret's head spiked to it, while in the other was his thick, enormous tail, which he cracked like a whip. Laughing madly and yelling strange curses, he swayed to and fro skillfully as horse and wagon clattered off down the road into the night. As suddenly as they had come, they were gone. Matthias walked out into the road, staff in hand. Stray wisps of hay drifted down behind him. His legs trembled uncontrollably. Constance hauled the Abbey cart back onto the road. Cornflower was helping her mother and Mrs. Church-Mouse to calm the little one's tears of fright. Together they stood in the cart tracks amid the settling dust. "Did you see that?" "I saw it, but I don't believe it." "What in heaven was it?" "What in hell, more like." "All those rats, such big ones, too." "Aye, and that one on the back. He looked like the devil himself." Seeing Matthias still stunned by what had happened, Constance took over the leadership. She wheeled the cart around. "I think we'd best head back for the Abbey," she said firmly. "Father Abbot'll want to know about this straight away." Knowing that the badger was far more experienced than himself, Matthias assumed the role of second in command. "Right, Cornflower, get in the cart and take charge of the mothers and babies," he said. "Mr. Field Mouse, Mr. Church Mouse, up front with Constance, please." Silently the mice did as ordered. The cart moved off, with Matthias positioned on the back, providing a rear guard. The young mouse gripped his staff tightly, his back to his charges, facing down the road in the direction the hay cart had taken. And that is the end of the first 5 chapters. I do hope that my reading on video isn't too terrible. I do know that it is much better in my head. I'm going to leave this stream off here. I might or might not stream again, but I should try to go to bed early, so I'm debating it. But either way, I will see you tomorrow. Bye-bye.
Aloha, this is Edwin. And are we broadcasting well? Why can we not see anything? There we go. Now we're broadcasting. That is fantastic. All right, so this is going to be part 2 of Story Time with Redwall. Now, Redwall is this fantastic series of books by Brian Jacques. Most of this is appropriate for children. Very young children might be a little bit put off with some of the violence in there. There is some violence in there. This is not a monetized stream. I do not own any of the rights to this. I did put, if you would like to support this series, I did put a link to Amazon. It's not an affiliate link. I don't make a dime off of it. I just wanted to do something fun and appropriate for families during I know a lot of people are having to stay at home now, so I wanted to do something fun and relatively wholesome. And let me double check and make sure that the stream is running okay. And is everybody able to hear okay? Is my chat. Let me know if the audio is okay. Make adjustments. Let me know if there's too much background noise. All right. All right, so we read, in the first part of this, we read chapters 1 through 5. So we're going to be picking up in chapter 6. If you are reading along at home, I am a little bit early, so we'll give it a couple more minutes to spool up. I'll make sure I'm set up, and hopefully all of you are doing absolutely great. So I and my family are here in Hawaii, and so far we've been spared from a lot of sickness. We do have some cases of the coronavirus here, but we don't have any deaths, and we've had very minimal number of hospitalizations. Hawaii is very dependent on tourism now, and so some of our friends and neighbors, they're wondering how they're going to get by. I'm sure that's the story in just about all of the United States right now. People are wondering how they are going to get by. Hopefully there'll be some good news when the legislation is passed today, and hopefully that'll create some relief for people. But make sure to look out for your friends, your family, and your neighbors, particularly if you have some elderly neighbors. Right now maybe is not the best time for elderly people or people in poor health to be going to the grocery store, running errands and stuff. So if you can help some of your neighbors, please do that. All right, once again, we're going to be starting with Redwall. In the first part of this, we read chapters 1 through 5. We're going to pick up on chapter 6. We're going to back up just a little bit into chapter 5 to get warmed up some. Okay? Now, if you're following along with this at the Redwall Abbey, and all these characters are mice and little woodland creatures, they've just had this big feast, and the main protagonist, Matthias, and the badger are now kind of driving people home, and they were on their way to drop off this one particular family. And let's pick it up. I'm just backing up about a page into chapter 5. The old cart rolled on gently down the long dusty road. They were now over halfway to the ruined church of St. Ninian, where John Churchmouth lived, as had his father, grandfather, and great-grandfather before him. Matthias had fallen into a deep slumber. Even Constance is the badger pulling this cart. Even Constance was unable to stop her eyelids drooping. She went slower and slower. It was as if the little cart and its occupants were caught in the magic spell of an enchanted summer night. Suddenly, and without warning, they were roused by the thunder of hooves. Nobody could determine which direction the sound was coming from. It seemed to fill the very air about them as it gathered momentum. The ground began trembling with the rumbling noise. Some sixth sense warned Constance to get off the road to a hiding place. The powerful badger gave a mighty heave. Her blunt claws churned the roadside soil as she propelled the cart through a gap in the hawthorn hedge, down to the slope of the ditch where she dug her paws in, holding the cart still and secure, while John Churchmouse and Cornflower's father jumped out and wedged the wheels firmly with stones. Matthias gasped with shock as a giant horse galloped past, its mane streaming out, eyes rolling in panic. It was towing a hay cart, which bounced wildly from side to side. Matthias could see rats among the hay. But these were no ordinary rats. They were huge, ragged rodents, bigger than any he had ever seen. Their heavy, tattooed arms waved a variety of weapons: pikes, knives, spears, and long, rusty cutlasses. Standing boldly on the backboard of the hay cart was the fiercest. Standing boldly on the backboard of the hay cart was the biggest, fiercest, most evil-looking rat that ever slunk out of a nightmare. In one claw, he grasped a long pole with a ferret's head spiked to it, while in the other was his thick, enormous tail, which he cracked like a whip. Laughing madly, and yelling strange curses, he swayed to and fro skillfully as horse and wagon clattered off down into the night. As suddenly as they had come, they were gone. Yeah, Victor, and I'm talking to someone in the chat, I said I would back up just about a page right before we get into chapter 6. Just get warmed up a little bit from where we left off. Matthias walked out into the road, staff in hand. Stray wisp of hay drifted down behind him. His legs trembled uncontrollably. Constance hauled the Abbey cart back onto the road. Cornflower was helping her mother, and Mrs. Churchmouse to calm the little one's tears of fright. Together they stood in the cart tracks amid the settling dust. Did you see that? I saw it, but I don't believe it. What in heaven was it? What in hell, more like? All those rats, such big ones too. Aye, and that one on the back, he looked like the devil himself. Seeing Matthias still stunned by what had happened, Constance took over the leadership. She wheeled the cart around. I think it's best we head back for the Abbey, she said firmly. Father Abbot will want to know about this straight away. Knowing that the badger was far more experienced than himself, Matthias assumed the role of second in command. Right, Cornflower. Get in the cart and take charge of the mothers and babies, he said. Mr. Fieldmouse, Mr. Churchmouse, up front with Constance, please. Silently, the mice did as ordered. The cart moved off with Matthias positioned on the back, providing a rear guard. The young mouse gripped his staff tightly, his back to his charges, facing down the down the road in the direction the hay cart had taken. Now that's the end of chapter 5, so let's go right into chapter 6. Chapter 6. The horse had gotten away safely. It was the hay cart that suffered most damage. Bolting recklessly from side to side down the road, the blinkered animal failed to see the twin stone gate post on its right. Skidding crazily, the cart smashed into the uprights. There was a loud splintering of shafts as the horse careened onwards, trailing in its wake reins, tracers, and shattered timber. His lightning reflexes serving him well, Clooney leaped clear. He landed cat-like on all fours as the hay cart upended in the roadside ditch, its buckled wheels spinning awkwardly. Feeling braced after his mad ride with the subsequent narrow escape, Clooney strode to the ditch's edge. The distressed cries of those trapped beneath the cart reached his ears. He spat contemptuously, narrowing his one good eye. "Come on, get up out of there, you cringing load of cat's meat," he bellowed. "Redtooth, Darkclaw, report to me or I'll have your skulls for Skittles."
Listen to music offline. YouTube music.
Skulls for Skittles. Clooney's two hench rats pulled themselves from the ditch, shaking their heads dazedly. Crack! Slash! The whip-like tail brought them swiftly to his side. "Three-leg and Scratch are dead, Chief." "Dead as dirt. The cart crushed them, Chief." "Stupid fools," snarled Clooney. "Serves them right. What about the rest?" Old Wormtail has lost a paw. Some of the others are really hurt." Clooney sneered. They'll get over it and suffer worse by the time I'm done with them. They're getting too fat and sluggish, by the tripes. They'd not last 5 minutes in a storm at sea. Come on, you dead and alive ragbags. Get up here and gather round. Rat struggled from the ditch, and the cart, frantic to obey the harsh command as quickly as possible. They crowded about the undamaged gatepost, which their leader had chosen as a perch. None dared to cry or complain about their hurts. Who could predict what mood the warlord was in? Right. Cock your lugs up and listen to me, Clooney snarled. First, we gotta find out where we've docked. Let's take a bearing on this place. Redtooth held up his claw. The Church of St. Ninian, Chief. It says so on the notice board over yonder. Well, no matter, Clooney snapped. I'll do as a berth until we find something better. Fangburn! Cheese thief! Here, Chief! Scout the area. See if you can find a better lodging for us than this heap of rubble. Trail back to the west. I think we passed a big place on the way. Aye, Chief! Frogblood! Scumnose! Chief! Frogblood and Scumnose. I love these names. Chief! Take 50 soldiers to see if you can round up any rats that know the lie of the land. Get big, strong rats. But bring along some weasels, stoats, and ferrets, too. They'll do in a pinch. Mine now. Don't stand for any arguments. Smash their dens up so they won't have any homes to worry about. If any refuse to join up, then kill them there and then. Understood? All clear, Chief! Clooney's bloodthirsty. Rag ear, mange fur. Take 20 rats and forage for supplies. The rest of you get inside the church. Red tooth, dark claw. Check the armor. See if there are things about that we can use as weapons. Iron spike railings. There's usually enough of them around the churchyard. Jump to it. Clooney had arrived. All right. Chapter 7. Matthias had never stayed up all night in his life. He was just a bit tired, but strangely excited. Great events seemed to have been set in motion by his news. Immediately upon being informed of the hay cart incident, the abbot had insisted upon calling a special council meeting of all Redwall's creatures. Once again, Cavern Hole, and Cavern Hole is this gathering area inside the Redwall Abbey, okay? Once again, Cavern Hole was packed to the doors, but this time it was for a purpose very different from the feast. Constance and Matthias stood in front of the council of elders. All about them was a hum of whispers and muttering. Abbot Mortimer called order, ding, 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 by ringing a small bell. Pay attention, everyone. Constance and Matthias, would you please tell the council what you saw tonight on the road to St. Ninian's? As clearly as they could, the badger and the young mouse related the incident of the rat-infested hay cart. The council began questioning them. Rats, you say? Matthias? What type of rat? Inquired Sister Clements. Big ones, Matthias replied, though I'm afraid I couldn't say what kind they were or where they had come from. What about you, Constance? Well, I remember that my old granddad once knew a sea rat, she answered. Going by his description, I'd say that's what they looked like to me. And how many would you say there were of these rats? Father Abbot asked. Couldn't say for sure, Father Abbot. There must have been hundreds. Matthias? Oh yes, Father. I'd agree with Constance. At least 400. Did you notice anything else about them, Constance? Indeed, I did, Father Abbot. My badger senses told me right off these were very bad and evil rats. The badger's statement caused uproar and shouts of, Nonsense! Pure speculation! That's right! Give a rat a bad name! Without even thinking, Matthias raised a paw and shouted aloud, Constance is right! I could feel it for myself. There was one huge rat with a ferret skull on a pole. I got a good look at him. It was like seeing some horrible monster. In the silence that followed, the abbot rose and confronted Matthias. Stooping slightly, he stared into the young mouse's bright eyes. Think carefully, my son. Was there anything special you noticed about this rat? Matthias thought for a moment. Everyone was watching him. He was much bigger than the others, Father. What else? Think, Matthias. I remember. He only had one eye. Right or left? Left, I think. Yes, it was the left, Father. Now, can you recall anything about his tail? I'd
certainly can, Matthias squeaked. It must have been the longest tail of any rat alive. He held it in his claw as if it were a whip. The abbot paced up and down before turning to the assembly. Twice in my lifetime, I have heard travelers speak of this rat. He bears a name that a fox would be afraid to whisper in the darkness of midnight. Clooney, the Scourge. A deathly hush fell upon the creatures in Cavern Hole. Clooney, the Scourge? Surely not. He was only some kind of folk legend, a warning used by mothers when youngsters were fractious or disobedient. Go to sleep, or Clooney will get you. Eat up your dinner, or Clooney will come. Come in this instant, or I'll tell Clooney. Most creatures don't even know what Clooney was. He was just some sort of boogeyman that lived in bad dreams in the dark corners of imagination. The silence was broken by scornful snorts and derisive laughter. Furry elbows nudged downy ribs. Mice were beginning to smile from sheer relief. Clooney the Scourge, indeed. Feeling slightly abashed, Matthias and Constant looked pleadingly towards the abbot for support. Abbot Mortimer's old face was as stern as he shook the bell vigorously for silence. Mice of Redwall, I see there are those among you who doubt the word of your abbot. The quiet but authoritative words caused an embarrassed shuffling from the council elders. Brother Joseph stood up and cleared his throat. Good Father Abbot, we all respect your word and look to you for guidance. But really, I mean... Sister Clemence stood up smiling. She spread her paws wide. Perhaps Clooney is coming to get us for staying up late? A roar of laughter greeted the ironic words. Constance's back hair bristled. She gave an angry growl, followed by a fierce bark. The mice huddled together with a fright. Nobody had ever seen a snarling, angry badger at a council meeting. Before they could recover, Constance was up on her hind legs having her say. I've never seen such a pack of empty-headed ninnies. You should all be ashamed of yourself, giggling like silly little otter cubs that have caught a beetle. I never thought I'd live to see the elders of Redwall acting in this way. Constance hunched her heavy shoulders and glared about with a ferocity that set them trembling. Now you listen to me. Take heed of what your Father Abbot has to say. The next creature who utters one squeak will answer to me. Understand? The badger bowed low in a dignified manner, gesturing with her massive blunt palm. The floor is yours, Father Abbot. Thank you, Constance, my good and faithful friend, the abbot murmured. He looked about him, shaking his head gravely. I have little more to say on the subject, but I see that you will need convincing. Here is my proposal. We will send 2 mice out to relieve the gatehouse. Let me see. Yes, Brothers Rufus and George, would you kindly go and take over from Brother Methuselah? Please send him in here to me. Tell him to bring the Traveler's Record volumes. Not the present issue, but the old editions, which were used in past years. Rufus and George, both solid-looking, sensible mice, took their leave with a formal bow to the abbot. Through a high-slitted window, Matthias could see the rosy pink and gold fingers of dawn stealing down to cavern hole as the candles began to flicker and smoke into stubs. All in the space of a night, events had moved from festivity to a crisis, and he, Matthias, had taken a major role in both. First, the big grayling. If you don't remember from the first chapters, the big grayling was the fish that Matthias had caught for the feast. Then the sighting of the cart, large happenings for a small mouse. Old Brother Methuselah had kept the Abbey records for as long as any creature could remember. It was his life's work and consuming passion. Beside the official chronicle of Redwall, he also kept his own personal volume, full of valuable information. Traveling creatures, migratory birds, wandering foxes, rambling squirrels, and garrulous hares. They all stopped and chatted with the old mouse, partaking of his hospitality, never dreaming of hurting him in any way. Methuselah had the gift of tongues. He could understand any creature, even a bird. He was an extraordinary old mouse who lived with the company of his volumes in the solitude of the gatehouse. Seated in the Father Abbot's own chair, Methuselah took his spectacles from a moss-bark case, carefully perching them on the bridge of his old nose. All gathered round to hear as he opened a record book and spoke in a squeak barely above a whisper.
My Lord Abbot Cedric. It is Cedric, isn't it? Oh, botheration. You'll be the new Abbot, Mortimer, the one who came after Cedric. Oh, dear me. I see so many of them come and go. You know, My Lord Abbot Mortimer and members of Redwall, I refer to a record of winter 6 years back.
Here the ancient mouse took a while to leaf through the pages.
Ah, yes, here it is. Late in November, year of the small sweet chestnut, from a frozen sparrowhawk, come down from the far north. Peculiar chap, spoke with a strange accent. I repaired his right wing pin feather. News of a mine disaster caused by a large savage sea rat with an extraordinary tail. It seems that this rat, Clooney they called him, wanted to settle his army in the mine. The badgers and any other creature who owned the mine drove them out. Clooney returned by night, and with his band of rats gnawed and undermined much of the wood shoring. This caused the mine to collapse the next day, killing the owners.
Brother Methuselah closed the volume and looked over his glasses at the assembly.
I have no need to read further. I can recite other misdeeds from memory. As the hordes of Clooney the Scourge have moved southwards over the past 6 years, I've gathered intelligence of other incidents. A farmhouse set alight. Later that same year, piglets, an entire litter of piglets, eaten alive by rats. Sickness and disease spread through livestock herds by Clooney's army. There was even a report brought to me 2 years ago by a town dog. An army of rats stampeded a herd of cows through a village, causing chaos and much destruction. Methuselah halted and blinked over his spectacles. And you dare doubt the word of our abbot that Clooney the Scourge exists? What idiotic mice you are, to be sure. Methuselah's words caused widespread consternation. There was much agitated nibbling of paws. Nobody could doubt he spoke the truth. He was already old and wise when the most elderly among them was a blind, hairless mite, pulling and whimpering for a feed from its mother. Oh, my whiskers! What a mess! Hadn't we better pack up and move? Maybe Clooney will spare us. Oh dear! Oh dear! What shall we do? Matthias sprang to the middle of the floor, brandishing his staff in a way that surprised even then. Do! He cried. I'll tell you what we'll do. We'll be ready. The abbot could not help shaking his head in admiration. It seemed that young Matthias had hidden depths. Why, thank you, Matthias, he said. I could not have put it better myself. That's exactly what we will do. We'll be ready. How's everybody doing? This now brings us to chapter 8. Let me know if you would like for me to keep going. If everybody is following along, enjoying so far. And let me know how the audio is. I'm trying to differentiate some of the voices for you. Get a sip of coffee here. All right. I tell you what, give me 2 seconds. Give me 2 seconds. Let me top off my coffee. I need to wet my whistle just a little bit, and I'll tell you what, we'll do chapter 8, and then I'll top off my coffee. Here we go. Chapter 8. Clooney the Scourge was having nightmares. He had laid down in the church mouse's bed for a well-earned rest while his army was going about its allotted tasks. He should never have tried to sleep on an empty stomach, but weariness overcame his hunger. In Clooney's dream, everything was shrouded in a red mist. The cries, "Ah!" The cries of his victims rang out as barns blazed and ships floundered on a stormy Red Sea. Cattle bellowed in pain as he battled with the pike that had taken his eye. The warlord thrashed about, killing, conquering, and laying waste to all in his dream. Then the phantom figure appeared. At first it seemed a small thing, a mouse in fact, dressed in a long hooded robe. Clooney did not relish meeting with it. He could not tell why, but the mouse kept getting closer to him. For the first time in his life, He turned and ran. Clooney went like a bat out of hell. Glancing back, he saw all the carnage, death, and misery he had caused in his career. The big rat laughed insanely. The big rat laughed insanely and ran faster, on and on, past scenes of desolation and destruction reeked by him. Clooney the Scourge. Floating through the red mist, he could still see the strange mouse hard on his heels. Clooney felt himself filled with hatred for his pursuer. It seemed to have grown larger. Its eyes were cold and grim. Deep inside, Clooney knew that even he could not frighten this oddly garbed mouse. Now it was wielding a large, bright sword, an ancient weapon of terrible beauty. The battle-scarred blade had a word written upon it that he could not make out. Sweat dripped from Clooney's claws like stinging acid. He stumbled. The strange figure was closer. It had grown into a giant. Clooney's lungs felt as if they were bursting. He realized that he had slowed up and the mouse was getting closer. He tried to put on an extra burst of speed, but his legs would not obey. They ran more and more slowly, more and more heavily. Clooney cursed aloud at his leaden limbs. He saw he was trapped in a deep, icy mud. For the first time, he knew the meaning of mindless fear and panic. He turned slowly. Too late. The enemy was upon him. He was rooted helpless to the spot. The avenging mouse swung the sword up high. 1,000,000 lights flashed from its deadly blade as it struck. Bong! The loud toll of the distant Joseph bell brought Clooney whirling back from the realms of nightmare to cold reality. He shivered, wiping the sweat from his fur with a shaky claw. Saved by the bell. He was puzzled. What did the fearful dream mean? Clooney had never been one to put his faith in omens, but this dream, it had been so lifelike and vivid that he shuddered. A timid paw, tapping on the door, snapped Clooney from his reverie with a start. It was Ragier and Mangefur, his scavengers. They slunk into the room, each trying to hide behind the other, knowing that the poor results of their search were likely to incur the chief's wrath. Their assumption was correct. Clooney's baleful eye watched them as his long, flexible tail sorted through their paltry offerings, which had dropped from their claws. A few dead beetles, 2 large earthworms, some unidentified vegetation, and the pitiful carcass of a long-dead sparrow. Clooney smiled at Ragier and Mangefur. With a sigh of relief, they grinned back at him. The chief was in a good mood. At lightning speed, the big rat's claws shot out and grabbed them both cruelly by the ears. The stupid hench rats yowled piteously as they were lifted bodily from the floor and swung to and fro. In a fit of rage, Clooney bashed their heads together. Half senseless, they were hurled towards the doorway, with his angry words ringing in their skulls. Beetles, worms, rotten sparrows, get me meat. Tender, young, red meat. Next time you bring me rubbish like this, I'll spit the pair of you and have you roasted in your own juice. Is that clear? Mangefur posted an accusing claw at his companion. Please, Chief, it was Rager's fault. If we'd gone across the fields instead of up the road. Don't believe that big fat liar, Chief. It was him who suggested going up the road, not me. Get out! The scavengers dashed off, bumping clumsily into each other with panic as they tried to get through the door together. Clooney slumped back on the bed and snorted impatiently. Frogblood and Scumnose were next to report. They bore news that cheered Clooney up somewhat. They'd obtained over 100 new recruits, mainly rats, but with a good scattering of ferrets and weasels, and the odd stoat. There'd been some who needed convincing. These had been press-ganged by a savage beating from Frogblood, coupled with the threat of horrible death. They were soon convinced that the wisest course was to enlist in Clooney's horde. Others were hungry nomads, only too willing to join up with the infamous Clooney. They were greedy for plunder and booty, and pleased to be on what they were sure would be the winning side. Lined up in the churchyard, the recruits were supplied with weaponry by Redtooth and Darkclaw. Impassively, they stood in ranks awaiting the warlord's inspection. Clooney nodded his approval. Scurvy rats, hungry ferrets, sly weasels, bad stoats. Exactly what he needed. Read 'em the articles, Redtooth, he snapped. Redtooth swaggered back and forth on the churchyard paving as he recited the formula from memory. Right. Eyes front. You're in the service of Clooney the Scourge now, me buckos. Desert, and you'll be killed. Retreat, and you're under sentence of death. Disobey, and you'll die. I'm Redtooth, Clooney's #1 rat. You will obey the word of your captains. They take orders from me. I take orders from Clooney. Remember that. Now, if anyone, two, or a group, or even all of you together want to try and beat Clooney and lead the horde, this is your chance. Without warning, Clooney charged headlong into the new recruits, lashing out widely with his scourging tail. He bowled them left, right, and center with his massive strength. Baring his teeth and slitting his eye, he whipped fiercely away until they fell back and scattered in disorder, hiding behind gravestones. Clooney threw back his head and roared with laughter. Ha 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 ha! No guts, eh? Ha! It's just as well. I don't want dead uns on my claws before I find a proper battle for you to fight. And make no mistake, when the right time comes, I'll see you fight. Aye, and die too. Now raise your weapons, and let's see if you know who your master is. A motley collection of evil-looking implements was framed by the cloudless sky as wild cries rang out from the newly inducted recruits. Clooney! Clooney!
Clooney the Scourge! That is chapter 8. Give me 2 minutes to top off my coffee, and we will go to chapter 7. Let me put this up on the screen. How's everybody doing so far, by the way? Let's see. And we'll make this. I just need a 5 minutes to get my coffee, and so you can go get yourself something to drink, and then we will pick up on chapter 9 if you are following along at home. All right. Put that right there just so everybody knows. And I will be right back. I like this story. I haven't read it in, man, maybe over 20 years. Quite a bit of violence in it for a children's story. I don't think it's a young children's story. Definitely clear good and evil. And how is everyone doing? Let me know when everybody's back, and we'll get going here again. Hopefully everybody is comfy. Let me know when everyone is back, and I will restart. I should have, if I had been smarter, I would have started the stream with a full cup of coffee, something to wet the whistle. All right, and again, if you're reading along at home, we've read chapter 6, 7, and 8, and now we are going into chapter 9 of Redwall by Brian Jacques. Go. So back at Redwall Abbey, chapter 9. Abbot Mortimer and Constance the Badger meandered through the grounds together. Both creatures were deep in thought. Had they spoken and voiced their thoughts, they would have mentioned the same subject, the safety of Redwall. Down long ages, the beautiful old abbey had stood for happiness, peace, and refuge to all. Diligent mice tended the neat little vegetable patches, which every season gave forth an abundance of fresh produce: cabbages, sprouts, marrows, turnips, peas, carrots, tomatoes, lettuces, and onions, all in their turn. Flower beds, heady and fragrant, with countless varieties of summer blooms, from rose to humble daisy, were planted by the mice and husbanded by the hard-working bee folk, who in their turn rewarded Redwall with plentiful supplies of honey and beeswax. The two friends wandered onward past the pond. Early morning sunlight glinted off the water, throwing out ripples from the fish caught by the overnight lines, which were baited and left to drift each evening by Brother Alf. Ahead of them lay the berry hedges, raspberry, blackberry, bilberry, and the strawberry patch, where every August sleepy baby creatures could be seen, their stomachs full after eating the pick of the crop. Gradually they made their way around the big old chestnut trees into the orchard. This was the abbot's favorite spot. Many a leisurely nap had he taken on sunny afternoons, with the aroma of ripening fruit hovering in his whiskers. Apples, pears, quince, plums, damsons, even a vine of old grape on the warm red stone of a south-facing wall. Old Mother Nature's blessing lay upon a haven of warm friendliness. Now, with the threat of Clooney upon Redwall, the two old friends assessed the beauteous bounty of their lifelong abode. Sweet birdsong on the still air tinged Constance's heart with sorrow and regret that this peaceful existence would soon pass. Gruffly, she snuffled deep in her throat, blinking off a threatening teardrop. The abbot sensed his companion's distress. He patted the badger's rough coat with a gentle palm. There, old girl. Don't fret. Many times in our history has tragedy been forestalled by miraculous happenings. Constance grunted in agreement, not wishing to disillusion her trusting old friend. Deep within her, she knew a dark shadow was casting itself over the abbey. Furthermore, it was happening in the present, not in the bygone days of fabled deeds. Matthias seated himself to an early breakfast in Cavern Hole. Nut bread, apples, and a bowl of fresh goat's milk. Cornflower. Now, if you don't remember, or if you're just getting caught up, cornflower is a pretty young mouse, and Matthias seems to be a little bit infatuated with him. Cornflower, along with other woodland creatures granted sanctuary, was sleeping in makeshift quarters provided by the good mice of Redwall. Matthias felt he had grown up overnight. Duty was a mantle that he had taken willingly upon his shoulders. If there was a threat to Redwall from outside, it must be dealt with. The mice of Redwall were peaceful creatures, but that must not be taken as a sign of weakness. Stolidly, he munched away as he confronted the problem. Eat heartily, Matthias. No point in facing trouble on an empty stomach. Feed the body, nourish the mind. The young mouse was surprised to see that old brother Methuselah had been watching him, his eyes twinkling behind the curious spectacles he invariably wore. The ancient mouse sat down at the breakfast table with a small groan. Don't look so surprised, young one. Your face is an open book to one of my years. Matthias drained the last of the milk from his bowl,
wiping cream from his whiskers with the back of a paw. "Give me your advice, Brother Methuselah," he said. "What would you do?" The old mouse wrinkled his nose. "Exactly the same thing as you would. That is, if I were younger and not so old and stiff." Matthias felt that he had found an ally. "You mean you would fight?" Methuselah rapped the table with a bony paw. "Of course I would. It's the only sensible course to take." He paused and stared at Matthias in an odd manner. "You know, there's something about you, young feller. Did you ever hear the story of how Martin the warrior first came to Redwall?" Matthias leaned together eagerly. "Martin? Tell me, brother. I love hearing about the warrior monk." Methuselah's voice dropped to a secretive whisper. "It is written in the great chronicle of Redwall that Martin was very young to be such a warrior. He could have been the same age as yourself, Matthias. Like you, he was impulsive and had a great quality of youthful innocence about him when he first came to our abbey. But it is also written that in time of trouble, Martin had the gift of a natural leader, a command over others far superior to him in age and experience. The chronicle says they looked to Martin as some look to a strong father. Matthias was full of wonderment, but he could not help feeling puzzled. "Why do you tell all this to me, Brother Methuselah?" The old mouse stood up. He stared hard at Matthias for a moment. Then turning, he shuffled slowly off. As he went, he called back over his shoulder. "Because, Matthias, because he was very like you." Before the young mouse could question the old one further, the Joseph bell tolled out a warning. Sandals slapping, Matthias dashed out into the grounds, nearly colliding with the abbot and Constance, who, like everyone else, were heading for the gatehouse. Brother Rufus and George had an incident to report. A large, evil-looking rat, covered in tattoos and carrying a rusty cutlass, had turned up at the gate. He had tried to gain entry by pretending he was injured. Limping about, the rat explained that he had been in a hay cart that overturned into a ditch. Would they come with him and render assistance to his friends, many of whom were lying trapped beneath the cart, crying out for help? Brother Rufus was no fool. "How many rats were traveling in the cart altogether?" he asked. "Oh, a couple of 100, came the glib reply. "Then why," reasoned Brother Rufus, "did the rats not give aid to their own companions? Surely all 200 were not trapped." The rat evaded the question and made a great show of rubbing his injured leg. Could they not take him in and dress his wound, and perhaps give him a bite to eat at least? Brother George agreed on condition that the rat surrender his weapon.
The rat made as if to do so, then suddenly lunged at Brother George, only to be sent sprawling by a blow from Brother Rufus's staff. Realizing that he was up against two big, competent mice who would stand no nonsense, he became abusive and bad-mouthed. "Ha! Just you wait, mice," he raged. "There's a whole army of us camped down in the church. When I tell Clooney how you treated me, ho ho ho! Just wait. That's all. We'll be back. By Fang we will." With that he slunk off, cursing all mice. The grim news was digested in silence by the assembled creatures. Mrs. Churchmouth began sobbing. Oh, dearie me! Did you hear that, my dear? They must be living in our home at St. Ninian's Church. Whatever shall we do? Our dear little home, full of dreadful rats. Mr. John Churchmouth tried to comfort his wife as best as he could. There, hush now, missus. Better to lose a house than lose our lives. A good job we got sanctuary here at Redwall. But what about the other creatures in the area? Cried Matthias. Sensible mouse, said Constance. Is Ambrose Spike anywhere about? I think Ambrose Spike is either the hedgehog or the porcupine. Sensible mouse, said Constance. Is Ambrose Spike anywhere about? He'd better do the rounds and tell them to sanctuary here at the Abbey as quickly as possible. Spike will come to no harm. Once he curls up, there's nothing that can touch him. This idea was greeted with enthusiasm. Brother Alf went out to find the hedgehog. The abbot suggested they all go inside the abbey and await further developments. Matthias piped up again. We best mount a guard on the walls. One of the older mice, Sister Clements, chided Matthias as an upstart. Her voice was stern and condescending. Novice Matthias, you will be silent and do as your abbot commands. Much to everyone's surprise, the abbot came to Matthias's defense. One moment, Clements. Matthias speaks sense. Let us hear what he has to say. We are none of us too old to learn. All eyes were turned on the young mouse. As Matthias heard himself boldly outline his plans for the defense of Redwall. It was 11 o'clock on that glorious June morning. Mossflower Wood and the meadowland stirred to the brazen voice of the great Joseph Bell. John Churchmouth heaved on the bell rope as he has been told to by Constance and Matthias. Bong! Boom! Bong! Boom! Even the small creatures in wood and field who could understand no language save their own knew what it meant. Time of danger, place of sanctuary. Carrying what simple belongings they needed, woodlanders and their families hurried from far and near to gain the safety of the Abbey before the storm of Clooney broke upon them. Squirrels, mice, voles, moles, otters, all save the birds of the air who were safe anyway. Up the long dusty road they came, mothers protectively herding young ones, while fathers provided a rear guard. Brother Methuselah stood at the gate with the abbot. He translated fully to each group of the creatures the abbot's message, in turn construing back to the Father Abbot their grateful thanks with pledges of help and loyalty to Redwall Abbey. For what creature had not been freely given the aid and special knowledge of the kindly mice? All knew that they owed their very existence to the abbot and his community. Healing, aid, food, shelter, and good advice were granted to all. Now was the time to unite and to repay, to give any help that was possible. Before much longer, Redwall would require the skills and knowledge of all its woodland allies. They would be gratefully given. Matthias and Constance stood on top of the high perimeter walls, watching the road. It was noon, and the sun shone directly overhead. Despite the heat, Matthias had ordered all the mice to put on their hoods. It served a double purpose, to shield their eyes from the sun and create a camouflage effect. Silently, each one stood, armed with a stout staff. The high red sandstone walls were far too lofty to be scaled by any normal creature. Instinctively, Matthias knew that this was a good defense and a formidable deterrent. Constance could feel her hackles beginning to prickle. She sniffed the air and shivered, despite the heat that shimmered in waves across the meadowlands. The big badger nudged Matthias. Listen to that. Matthias pricked up his ears and looked at her, questioning. Even the birds have stopped singing, Constance said quietly. The young mouse gripped his staff tighter. Yes, it's the silence we can hear. The grasshoppers have gone quiet. Constance peered down the road as she spoke. Strange for a summer day, little friend. Bong! Every creature standing on the ramparts twitched with fright as the loud voice of the Joseph bell rang out, and John Churchmouse shouted from his position high in the belfry. They're coming! Down the road! I can see them! I can see them! That is the end of chapter 9. I think next time we've been going for about an hour here. Next time we'll pick up with chapter 10. And again, if you want to read along with this, I put a link to the Amazon site, and that's not an affiliate link. I'm not making anything off this. I've set the video to demonetized because I don't own the rights to this. But I just wanted to do a story time again, something fun, something accessible. I think this book is pretty safe for probably all but the very youngest children. They might be a little bit scared by some of that. There is some mouse and mouse violence. Tomorrow, let's see, tomorrow is Friday. I may not do a stream on Friday. We'll see how that goes. If I don't do one on Friday, I will probably pick this back up Saturday. And then Saturday, since I have a little bit longer, maybe I will try and go for about 2 hours. But we'll start back up on chapter 10 when we pick up. Anyway, thank you for hanging out with me. Hopefully you're enjoying this story as much as I am. Again, this is Redwall by Brian Jacques. Anyway, until we meet each other again, I wish you a good night, aloha, and God bless you all. Good night. Aloha. This is Edwin Voyette, joining you from Honolulu, Hawaii. And this is Storytime, a Storytime hour tonight. We're continuing with Redwall. Redwall is this huge series by Brian Jacques. It's probably appropriate for children, maybe about 9 and up. There is some violence, but it is very wholesome. So hopefully you are doing well and you are comfy. You're ready to settle in for a little bit of storytelling. Redwall is this huge series. If you're watching this on replay, I say hello to a few people. It's probably appropriate for children. I'm going to give it a couple, maybe about 10, because I started just to violence. But it is very wholesome. Now, if you've just joined in, so hopefully there's elements of Redwall. You're ready to settle that, or a bit like Redwall is a bit like the King Arthur series. If you're watching this on replay, you get some sounds from other places. It's a bit like the King Arthur legend, and we'll see that. But it's all these woodland creatures, the lives of these woodland creatures, and they're centered around. Life is kind of centered around this place called Redwall Abbey, right? And we've met a few characters. We've met the abbot. We've met some of his assistants. We've met some of the country people. In this case, all the characters in the story are mice, rats, squirrels, a badger. We've also met Clooney the rat, who is the villain of the story. And you've met Matthias, or Matthias, either way you want to pronounce it, who is the young protagonist. All right. We're going to start up in Chapter 10. Chapter 10. I believe I put the link to the previous video if you've missed out. Brian Jacques has a very accessible style. And there is a little bit of a morality story in this, I think. It's the hero's journey. It is the journey of the hero. But there is good and evil. Here we go, Chapter 10. And please do let me know if the audio goes bad for whatever reason. I'll keep a chat note. Let's see if I can find out. Chat. Let's see if we can get that. Let me know if for any reason the feed goes bad. YouTube has had some trouble, and we'll keep it in the chat. Here we go. And this is, by the way, this is a demonetized stream. I haven't monetized this. I don't own the rights to this. If you enjoy this, I think I have a link where you can purchase it on Amazon. I found it to be a great story. I don't think I've read it in more than 20 years, but it's held up very well. Anyway, here we go. Redwall Chapter 10. Clooney's army halted at the sound of the Joseph bell. The Joseph bell is the bell for Redwall Abbey. And the mice were ringing this to alert everyone to the approach of Clooney's army. All right, here we go. Clooney's army halted at the sound of Joseph bell. As the dust settled, Fangburn looked to his leader for approval. They're ringing that big bell again, Chief. Ha ha ha! Maybe they think it'll frighten us off. The warlord's eyes rested balefully on his scout. Shut your mouth, fool. If you'd done as I'd ordered and come right back to report the way Cheese Thief did, We might have been inside the Abbey by now. Fangburn slunk back into the ranks. He hoped Clooney had forgotten, but Clooney rarely forgot anything on the campaign. The element of surprise had been lost. Now he must try another ploy, a show of force. The mere sight of a fully armed horde had worked before, and he had little doubt it would prove effective now. Ordinary peaceful creatures were usually panic-stricken at the sight of Clooney the Scourge at the head of his army. The rat was a cunning general, except the times when his mad rage took control of him. But what need of berserk fits for a bunch of silly mice? Clooney knew the value of fear as a weapon, and Clooney was a fearsome figure. His long, ragged black cloak was made of bat wings, fastened at the throat with a mole skull. The immense war helmet he wore had the plumes of a black bird and the horns of a stag beetle adorning it. From beneath the slanted visor, his one eye glared viciously out at the Abbey before him. Matthias's voice rang out sharp and clear from the high parapet. "Halt! Who goes there?" Redtooth swaggered forward and took up the challenge in his chief's name as he called back up at the walls. "Look well, all creatures. This is the mighty horde of Clooney the Scourge. My name is Redtooth. I speak for Clooney, our leader. Constance. This is Constance the Badger." Constance's reply was harsh and unafraid. "Then speak your piece and be gone, rats." Silence hung upon the air while Redtooth and Clooney have a whispered conference. Redtooth returned to the walls. "Clooney the Scourge says he will not deal with badgers. He will only speak with the leaders of the mice. Let us in so that my chief may sit and talk to your chief." Redtooth dodged back as his request was greeted by howls of derision. "Woo!" and some loose pieces of masonry from the ramparts. These plump little mice were not as peaceful as they first looked. The rats looked to Clooney, but he was eyeing the abbot who had joined Constance and Matthias. They appeared to be consulting quietly. Clooney watched tensely. There seemed to be some disagreement between the old mouse and his two advisors. They conferred a while. Then Matthias came forward to the parapet. He pointed at Clooney and Redtooth with his staff. "You there, and you also. My abbot will talk with you both. The rest must remain outside." A rumble of protest from the horde was silenced by a crack from Clooney's tail. He lifted his visor. "We agree, Mouse. Let us in." "But what about hostages for safe conduct?" hissed Redtooth. Clooney spat contemptuously. "Don't talk fool's talk. Do you imagine a load of mice in funny robes could take me captive?" Redtooth gnawed anxiously on a split claw. "Maybe not, Chief, but have you cast a weather eye over that badger?" Clooney answered quietly out the side of his mouth. "Don't worry, I've been watching you. A real big country bumpkin. No, these are mice of honor. They'd sooner die than break their word to you. You leave this to me. As Clooney and Redtooth made for the gatehouse door, Constance shouted, "Put down your weapons, rats! Throw off your armor to show this that you come in peace." Redtooth spluttered angrily. "Hell's teeth! Who does that one think she's ordering around?" Clooney shot him a warning glance. "Quiet. Do as she says." Both rats took off their armor and placed it on a pile on the road. Matthias cried down to Clooney, "If you really are Clooney the Scourge, then we know of your tale. It is a weapon. Therefore you will knot it tightly around your waist so that it cannot be used." Clooney laughed mirthlessly. He squinted at Matthias and cracked his tail dramatically. "Young mouse," he called, "you do right to ask this thing, for truly you are looking at Clooney." You were looking at Clooney the Scourge. Having said this, he took his tail in his claws and pulled the poisoned warspite from its tip. Tossing it on the armor pile, Clooney hitched his tail in a knot around his middle. "Now will you let us in, mice? You can see that we are unarmed." Ponderously, the heavy gate inched open. The two rats passed through a bristling forest of staves. The gate slammed shut behind them. Clooney mentally estimated the walls to be of immense thickness as he and Redtooth, ducking their heads, emerged from the tunnel-like arch into the Abbey grounds, where Constance and Matthias were waiting in the sunlight. The defenders followed the two rats closely, menacing them with staves. Matthias rapped out a curt command. "Leave us, mice. Go back to your duties on the wall." Unhappy at leaving the abbot unguarded, the mice hesitated to obey the order to withdraw. Clooney addressed Matthias scornfully. "Here, mouse. Watch me shift 'em." Suddenly he whirled upon the apprehensive creatures. The single eye rolled madly in its socket as Clooney bared claws and fangs, snarling, "Ha ha! I've got a powerful hunger for mice. You best get a loaf on those walls. Ha ha ha!" Clooney leaped into the air. The mice scattered in panic. Constance stopped the proceedings with a loud, angry bark. "Here now! Enough of that, rat. You are here to talk with the abbot. Go, get along with you." Matthias was glad he was walking behind the rats. He blushed with shame. Clooney had sent the defenders scattering like butterflies in a whirlwind. Matthias was furious. The enemy now knew he was dealing with untrained and untested soldiers. As the party walked towards Cavern Hole, Clooney could sense hostility emanating from the young mouse, who flip-flopped behind him in overlarge sandals. Strange for one so young to be counted as a captain, he thought. Moreover, the little fella didn't seem to fear him. But enough of that. Clooney would deal with him when the time came. Meanwhile, the big rat gazed about his surroundings in secret admiration. What an astounding place. He allowed himself a peek at the future. One day this would be called Clooney's Castle. He liked the sound of that. Secure from attack, living off the fat of the land. In his mind's eye, he saw it all. Those mice and the woodland creatures enslaved, living just to serve him. He would hold sway as far as the eye could see. Power, and into his rulings, a dream come true. King Clooney. Entering the abbey, the party stopped to make way for a pretty little field mice bearing a tray. "Oh, Matthias," she said, "I've brought some refreshments for you and..." "Thank you, Cornflower. Put them down on the table," said Matthias abruptly. Redtooth nudged Clooney. "Cornflower, eh? Satan's nose. She's a pretty little one for you." Clooney remained silent. He stood insolently watching Cornflower set the table in cavern hole. Pretty one indeed. The abbot indicated chairs. They all sat, except Clooney, who lounged against the table using the chair as a footstool. He glared at Redtooth until he stood and waited alongside his chief. Idly, Clooney picked up a bowl of honeyed milk and sampled it. "Slop!" He spat it out on the floor. The abbot folded his paws into the wide sleeves of his habit and stared impassively at the warlord. "What do you want at Redwall Abbey, my son?" Clooney kicked the chair over and laughed madly. "Your son. Ha! It's a good one. I'll tell you what I want, Mouse. I want it all. The lot. Everything. Do you hear me?" Matthias's chair clattered on its side as he sprang forward, breaking free from the restraining paws of the abbot. "Listen, Rat, you don't scare me. I'll give you our answer. You get nothing. Now do you understand that?" Shaking with fury, Matthias allowed himself to be pulled back onto the chair. The abbot turned to Clooney. "You must forgive Matthias. He is young and headstrong. Now, as to your proposal, I'm afraid it's out of the question. Should you or your army require medical attention, food, clothing, or help upon your way, you will find us only too willing to assist." Clooney interrupted rudely by pounding upon the table until the abbot was silenced. He pointed a claw at Redtooth. "Read them the articles." Redtooth held up a tattered parchment. He cleared his throat. "These are the articles of surrender, to be obeyed by all creatures who come under the claw of Clooney the Scourge, or any of his commanders. 1. Surrender will be total and unconditional. 2. Clooney will execute the leaders of all who choose to oppose him. 3. All property conquered will belong solely to Clooney the Scourge. This includes homes, food, crops, land, and additionally, all creatures dwelling on said property, they shall be owned by Clooney." Thwack! Redtooth got no further. Unable to contain himself, Matthias sent his staff ripping through the middle of the articles. As the torn document fluttered to the floor, Redtooth launched himself at Matthias with a snarl. The rat was actually in mid-air when a huge blunt paw knocked him flat. He lay stunned with Constance standing over him. Why pick on a small mouse? Surely a big, strong rat like you can deal with an old badger. Come on, try me for size. It was only the timely intervention of Abbot Mortimer that saved Redtooth's life. Constance, would you please let that rat up? Much as I'd like to see him get his just deserts, you must remember we cannot break the law of hospitality in our abbey. Redtooth staggered shakily to his feet, backing warily away from the badger. Clooney spoke as if nothing had occurred. You, Abbot Mouse, you have until tomorrow evening to give me your answer. Not normally given to anger, the abbot stared Clooney in the eye, his face a mask of cold fury. I will not need until tomorrow, rat. You can have my answer now. How dare you come with your robber band to read articles of death and slavery to me? I tell you that neither you nor your army will ever set paw or claw inside Redwall. Not while I or any of my creatures have breath in our bodies to fight and resist you. That is my solemn word. Clooney sneered and turned on his heel. Followed by Redtooth, he stamped out. On the stairs between Cavern Hole and Great Hall, he stopped and turned. His voice, his cold voice, echoing between both chambers. Then die, all of you, every female and young one. You have refused my terms. Now you will suffer the punishment of Clooney. You will beg on your knees for death to come swiftly, but I shall make your torment loud and long before you die. It was then that Constance did something the creatures would come to speak of in years to come. Exerting the full strength of a female badger, she lifted the massive Cavern Hole dining table. It was a huge, solid oaken thing that no dozen mice could even move. Dishes clattered and food spilled as Constance heaved the table above her head. Her voice was a roar. Get out, rats! Leave this abbey! I'm weary of your voices. Hurry before I break the laws of hospitality, and ask the abbot's pardon later. Go while you still have skulls. With the best grace he could muster, Clooney walked rather quickly up the stairs, followed by Redtooth, who laughed nervously. Big country bumpkin head, Chief. One more word from you back there, and she'd have thrown that table and crushed us. Remembering who it was that he had spoken to in this insolent fashion, Redtooth cringed, expecting Clooney to deal him a blow for impudence. But nothing happened. Clooney was standing transfixed, oblivious to all about him, even Matthias and the abbot who had followed him out. Clooney stood staring at the tapestry. Who is that mouse? He gasped. Matthias followed the direction of the rat's gaze. He walked to the tapestry with his paw outstretched. Do you mean this mouse? Clooney nodded dumbly. Matthias, still with paw outstretched, declared proudly, "This is Martin the warrior. He founded our order. And I'll tell you something else, Rat. Martin was the bravest mouse that ever lived. If he were here today, he'd just take up his big sword and send you and all your bullies packing. Those of you he didn't chop up into crow meat." Much to everyone's surprise, Clooney allowed himself to be shown out. He was like one in a daze, all the way back to the gatehouse. A hush fell over the mice on guard as Clooney and Redtooth were led out onto the road. Swiftly, the horde gathered around the warlord and his lieutenant. They awaited orders. Deputizing for Clooney, Redtooth called out, "Form up! Back to the church, everyone!" If you don't remember, that was the church where Cornflower and her family were from. So the church is a different location than the Redwall Abbey. Okay? Clooney marched automatically, shaking his head in disbelief. Martin the warrior, the mouse who pursued him through his nightmares. What did it mean? As Redtooth marched away, a voice hailed him from the wall. He turned and looked upward. The torn articles, the parchments wrapped around a fistful of rotting vegetables, splattered in his face. Livid with rage, he clawed the foul mess from his eyes and saw Constance the badger leaning over the parapet with a wicked grin of delight on her striped muzzle. The badger shouted mockingly, "Don't forget to call again, Rat. I'd be delighted to see you. We've got some unfinished business that I'm looking forward to settling. Just you and me, Redtooth."
Listen to music.
Before the rat
personalized
could
to you.
reply,
YouTube Music
she had
Premium.
vanished
Start a
from
1-month free
sight.
trial.
That is chapter 10. That is chapter 10. Let me catch up with chat. Hey, there is Armchair Warlord, Sharon Marlowe, Reclaimer, Force Ghost, said he was just stopping by. Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. And Jake. Hey, Jake, good to see you here. Let me know if you would like for me to continue on with chapter 11, or if this is a good place to jump through here and see how long chapter 11 is. Yeah, chapter 11 is not too bad. And how is everybody doing tonight? I'm really enjoying this book. It's held up very well. Sharon Marler says read. Okay. Tell you what, let me get a little bit more water and I will pick up chapter 11. Chapter 11. Rafe DeLu says this isn't showing up on the subscription page again. So many live streams are getting stealth. It'll be alright. All the links will be there and I'll make a playlist. Oh. Chapter 11. Later that evening, Brother Alf was patrolling his stretch of wall when he noticed a movement in the ferns at the edge of the mossflower wood.
Mossflower Wood is a small forest, just very close to the abbey at Redwall. They peered over the parapet. Excuse me. Later that evening, Brother Alf was patrolling his stretch of wall when he noticed a movement of the ferns at the edge of Mossflower Wood. Constance and Matthias were summoned hastily. They peered over the parapet, Brother Alf pointing to where he had seen the ferns moving. Over there, to the right of that aspen. Look, they're moving again. Matthias had better nocturnal vision than either of his friends. He was the first to recognize the forlorn figure that rolled on the grass. It's Ambrose Spike. He's hurt. Quick, let's get down there. Hold fast, Constance warned. It may be a trap. Matthias was loath to hang about while a creature was lying injured within his sight, but he had to heed his friend's advice. There just might be some of Clooney's rats lying in ambush for any creature that ventured into the shadowy fringes of Mossflower. However, Matthias was growing impatient. We can't leave poor Ambrose lying out there, Constance. He'll die. We've got to do something. The badger sat down with her snout between her paws. Yes, we've got to think. Anyone got an idea? The two mice joined her. Hardly had Matthias sat down when he leaped up again. I've got it. Stay here. I'll be back in a tick. Brother Alf watched the little figure flip-flopping off. He gave a sigh. And shook his head. What do you suppose our Matthias is up to? The badger smiled affectionately. More and more she was coming to trust Matthias's natural skill as leader and tactician. Don't fret, Brother Alf. Whatever it is, you can bet your habit it'll be an original Matthias gem. That young mouse has got more in his head than a pile of acorns. Brother Alf looked out at the still form in the grass. It may be too late. Ambrose isn't even twitching. Look, he's not rolled up in a ball anymore. Further speculation was curtailed by the appearance of Matthias. With him were half a dozen moles. Their leader glanced out at the hedgehog. He'd scratched some hasty calculations on the wall with his claw, then turned to Matthias. Oi, I think we can get your edge pig back, sir. You get us out in that gate and stand watch. Turning to his team, the foremole, for that was his official title, he's the foremole, began discussing tunnel width, coupled with reverse prickle drag, forward traction, and all the other specialist details that are routine to the average qualified tunnel mole. Matthias whispered to Constance and Brother Alf. Foremole and his crew are first class at rescue work. They've often rescued burrowers from cave-ins. All we have to do is stand guard by the southeast wicket gate until they're safely back. Right! What are we waiting for? Let's go, said the badger. Silently, they slid outside the small green-painted iron door, Matthias straining his eyes anxiously to see if there were any signs of life in the hedgehog. He still lay about 150 mouse paces from where they stood. The moles unraveled a rope sling. 4 moles stood watching as 2 of his team started the dig. Matthias looked on in wonderment. One moment, they were above ground. Moments later, there was a veritable shower of loam and topsoil
as they vanished beneath the earth, nature's own technicians. In a trice they were back, moist snouts poking from the excavation. They made their ground report to Formo.
Har! Him be nice and soft, sir. Bain't no rock nor root to stop us'n. Straight for here we be thinking.
I don't know what moles sound like. Satisfied, Formo moved towards the test hole where the rest of his team.
I'll dig ahead. You White and Workins, Gaffer and Marge, follow up ashoring.
When you shore something up, you prop it up with lumber. We do this in demolition sometimes. They're shoring up the tunnel. He tugged his snout respectfully to Matthias and Constance.
You gentle beast, bide by ear till us back.
Another quick shower of soft, dark earth, and the moles were lost to view beneath the ground surface. Constance sniffed the breeze as Matthias turned his ears to the nighttime woodland sounds. They watched the ground humping into a continuous hillock that progressed further as the moles tunneled towards Ambrose Spike. The night remained calm and still, but Matthias and Constance stayed alert, both knowing if they failed to observe this rudimentary law of nature, the penalty could be fatal. Matthias did a little shuffle of excitement.
Look, they've come up right under poor old Ambrose. My word, what splendid moles. Good heavens, he's vanished completely. They must have him inside the tunnel.
In a surprisingly short time, the tunnelers were back. Emerging from the hole, they carried the hedgehog in the rope sling across their backs, refusing any help from the badger or the mouse. Formo merely tugged his snout.
Nay, nay, you'uns only get your paws dirted.
As swiftly as possible, Ambrose was hurried to the Abbey infirmary and sickbay. He was attended by the abbot himself. A hasty diagnosis revealed that the hedgehog was suffering from a long, jagged wound that ran from the back of his ear, to the tip of his paw. Brother Alf nodded sympathetically.
Because happy dances.
It's probably what caused old Ambrose to pass out. Pain and loss of blood. He must have traveled a fair way in that condition. Do you think he'll live, Father Abbot? The abbot chuckled quietly. He cleaned the long, ugly wound and applied a poultice of herbs. No cause for alarm, Brother Alf. Ambrose Spike is made of leather and needles. Tough as a boulder, this old ruffian is. Look, he's beginning to come around already. One second. Sure enough, after some peculiar grunts, a much curling and uncurling, the hedgehog opened his eyes and looked about. Oh, my aching ear! Father Abbot, you wouldn't see a poor son of the Spike suffering this without a drop of last October's nut brown ale to wet his parched gullet, he pleaded. All the creatures laughed aloud with delight and relief at seeing their old friend alive and well once again. Matthias was astonished at the amount of nut brown ale that Ambrose supped before he deemed himself fit enough to make a report. The hedgehog smacked his lips noisily. Ah, that's better. Now let me see. I did as you asked me. gave as many creatures fair warning as I could. The Joseph Bell helped a great deal to warn everyone. Well, to cut a long story short, it must have been near noon when I stopped at Vole Bank. I told the Voles the bad news. And blow me, if that little ninny Cullen Vole didn't go shrieking and screaming all over the place as to how they'd all be murdered in their beds. Believe me, there was no way of silencing that daft young thing. Anyway, his noise must have alerted a pack of those rats who were out foraging. Before you could say knife, they were upon us. There was such a gang of them that I couldn't do anything. I had to curl up. I carried off young Cullen and his mom and dad. But try as they would, there was no laying claws on Ambrose Spike. No, sir. Then one of them had a go at me with a point of iron churchyard railing. Stabbed away at me, the devil did. They reckoned I was dead. Said I was too spiky to eat, so they dragged the Vole family off, and I lay still until the coast was clear. I made it as far as Mossflower, and that's all I can remember. Is there any more left in that jug? This wound's given me gyp. I need ale for medicinal purposes, Father. Take a swallow of water. All right, this is story time. So let's stay friendly in the chat. If there's an argument, there's someplace else you can take it. But this ain't the place. This is Redwall Abbey. Matthias groaned. Matthias groaned.
You kicked off your study
hung
session
his
with a
head
lo-fi
in
playlist,
despair.
but now you really need to
The
focus.
Vole family
Turn your
taken
phone screen off,
captive.
but keep your music on. Try
Death or
YouTube
slavery
Premium on us.
was all the wretched creatures could look forward to. Emboldened by the rescue of the hedgehog, Matthias was about to suggest that he and Constance, together with some hand-picked helpers, ventured to undertake a rescue mission to St. Ninian's Church. It was as if the abbot and Constance both read his thoughts at the same time. Abbot Mortimer sighed and shook his head at Matthias. The badger was more vulnerable. Matthias, forget it. Abandon any hopes you have of snatching the Vole family from under Clooney's nose. Imagine it. A few of us going up against several hundred armed rats in their own camp. Ridiculous. A fat lot of good we'd be as defenders of Redwall, with our heads fixed to Clooney's standard. Matthias, you're a very brave young mouse, so please try to set an example to the rest by not becoming a foolish or a dead one. On reflection, Matthias could see the wisdom of the badger's counsel. Long after they had all retired for the night, he sat up thinking. 100 mad ideas pounded through his brain, each one wilder than the last. Feeling at a loss, he wandered up into Great Hall and stood in front of the tapestry. Without consciously realizing it, he found himself talking to Martin the warrior. Oh, Martin, what would you have done in my place? know that I'm only a young mouse, a novice, not even a proper redwall member yet. But once you were young too, I know what you would have done. You'd have buckled up on your armor, picked up your mighty sword, gone down to that church and battled with the rats until they released the voles or perished beneath your blade. But alas, those days are gone. I have no magic sword to aid me, only the advice of my elders and betters, to which I must listen. Matthias sat down upon the cool stone floor. He gazed longingly up at Martin the warrior. So proud, so brave. What a dashing figure he cut. Looking back down to himself, his baggy green robes and oversized sandals, Matthias felt hot tears of shame and frustration spilling from his eyes, dripping on his young whiskers. Unable to stop himself, he wept freely. The soft touch of a gentle paw on his back caused him to look around. It was Cornflower. Matthias wished he were dead.
Your baby falls asleep.
He quickly turned his face away, knowing she could see his tears.
But you're thankful for whatever puts your baby
Cornflower, please go away.
You're just hoping they don't wake
Matthias
up during
sobbed.
this ad. Upgrade to
The
YouTube
little field
Music
mouse,
Premium and get
the little field
uninterrupted
mouse,
ad-free
however,
music.
would not go.
More non-stop reggaeton.
She sat down on the
more
floor next to
non-stop
Matthias.
Start a trial on
Taking
us.
the edge of
Terms
her
and conditions
pinafore,
apply.
she softly wiped away his tears. For such a shy little mouse, she had quite a bit to say. Matthias, don't be ashamed. I know why you cry and grieve. It's because you are kind and good, not a hard-hearted, pitiless rat like Clooney. Please listen to me. Even the strongest and bravest must sometimes weep. It shows they have a great heart, one that can feel compassion for others. You are brave, Matthias. Already you have done great things for one so young. I'm only a simple country-bred field mouse, but even I can see the courage and leadership in you. A burning brand shows the way, and each day your flame grows brighter. There is none like you, Matthias. You have the sign of greatness upon you. One day, Redwall and all the land will be indebted to you. Matthias, you are a true warrior. Matthias, with his eyes dry and his head held high, stood up. He felt himself stand taller than he ever had. He helped Cornflower to her feet and bowed to her. Cornflower, how can I ever thank you for what you have said? You too are a very special mouse. It is late now. Go and get some rest. I think I will stay here a while longer. The field mouse untied her headband. It was her favorite one, pale yellow bordered with the cornflowers after which she was named. She tied it to Matthias's arm, the white one, just above the elbow, a maiden's colors for her champion warrior. Silently she crept off. Matthias could feel his heart beating against his chest. He spoke to the image of Martin. Thank you, warrior. You spoke to me through Cornflower. You gave me the sign that I asked of you. Boy, let's see, how long is chapter 12? Chapter 12 is short. I can do chapter 12, but I need just a 3-minute break. I need to get some more water. Do you want chapter 12 or do you want me to leave off here? Let me know. Yeah, I'm still trying to find out. What the appropriate amount of reading to do in one session is. Let's see if we can. All right. No breaks. All right, let me get some water. I'll be right back.
You started with a K-pop dance tutorial, and now you're a Blackpink superfan. With YouTube Premium, you get those tutorials uninterrupted, and you get a dedicated music streaming app, where you can go deeper into the album and more. Enjoy your videos and music ad-free and offline when you sign up for YouTube Premium. Try 1 month on us. Victor from the chat says that's not realistic. Well, it is a children's story about animals, about talking animals. I don't think realism is the point. All right. Chapter 12. Again, if you're just joining late, we're doing a little bit of a story time here. Hopefully some of you are reading along at home. This is Redwall by Jacques. Chapter 12. At the Church of St. Ninian, Clooney sat in the wreckage of what had once been a pulpit. Redtooth, Darkclaw, Cheese Thief, and Fangburn lounged about at his feet on old burst hassocks. Clooney was in one of his strange moods again. He showed little interest in the captive Vole family, merely ordering that they be kept under guard until he found time to deal with them. Most of his army slept in the choir loft or the lady chapel. The rest were posted on sentry duty outside. Cautiously, his captains watched the warlord. Clooney's long tail swished restlessly. The single eye stared at a carved eagle holding the rotting lectern on its outspread wings. What thoughts occupied the dark, devious mind of Clooney the Scourge? Finally, he looked up and spoke. "Go and get Shadow. Bring him here to me." Darkclaw and Fangburn scurried off to obey the command. Silently, the others waited, their eyes glinting in evil anticipation. The chief had a plan. Like all of his schemes, it would be cunningly simple and wickedly brilliant. There was no better general than Clooney when it came to strategy. Shadow had been with Clooney for many years. Nobody was sure if he was rat or weasel, or even a bit of both. He was very lithe and wiry, and his long, sinewy body was covered in sleek black fur. There was no hint of another color in his coat. It was blacker than moonless midnight. His eyes were strangely slanted, black without any brightness in them. The eyes of Shadow were like those of a dead thing. He stood before Clooney, who had to strain his one eye against the darkness of the church to make sure he was really there. Shadow, is that you? The reply sounded like a whisper of wet silk across a smooth slate. Clooney, I am here. Why do you want Shadow? The captain shivered at the sound of the voice. Clooney leaned forward. Did you see the walls of that abbey today? I was there. Shadow sees all. Tell me true. Could you climb them? No beast I know of could climb those walls. Except you? Except me. Clooney gestured with his tail. Come closer then. I will tell you what must be done. Shadow sat on the top pulpit step. Clooney issued his orders. You will climb the shadow wall. Many sentries patrol the top of the wall. Take the utmost care. If you get captured, you're of no use to me. There is no point in one alone trying to attack the gatehouse and open the door. It is too well guarded, so forget the gate. Shadow gave no hint that Clooney had inadvertently read his mind. He remained motionless as Clooney continued. Once you have scaled the wall, make for the main abbey door. Should it be locked for the night, you will use all your skill to open it without any noise. It is vital that you get inside. The first room you will find yourself in is the main one. The mice call it Great Hall. Walk in, turn around, and on the left wall facing you is a long tapestry covered in pictures and designs. Now listen carefully. In the bottom right-hand corner of that tapestry is a picture of a mouse dressed in armor leaning on a big sword. I want it. Cut it, rip it, or tear it out. But get it for me. I must have it. Don't come back without it, Shadow. Puzzlement was written on the faces of the four captains who had overheard the orders. A picture of a mouse? Clooney had never been known as a collector of pictures. Fangbird whispered to Cheese Thief, "What use is a picture of a mouse to the chief?" Clooney heard. He came to the edge of the pulpit. Grasping the sides of the lectern, he surveyed his small congregation like some satanic minister. Brother Fangburn, let me explain. I will tell you why it is that you and all your kind will forever remain servants, why I shall always be the master. Did you not see the faces of those mice today? The mere mention of Martin the warrior sends them into ecstasies. Don't you see? He is their symbol. His name means the same to those mice as mine does to the horde, in a different way maybe. Martin is some sort of angel. I am the opposite. think for a moment. If anything were to happen to me, you'd all be a leaderless rabble. A headless mob. So if the mice were to lose their most precious omen, the picture of Martin, where would that leave them? Redtooth slapped his haunches. He rocked to and fro, sniggering with uncontrolled glee. Brilliant, Chief. Diabolical. They'd just be a crowd of terrified little mice without their wonderful Martin. And that's when we'll strike. The powerful tail lashed backwards, wrapping itself around Shadow's body. He was dragged forward, face to face with his master. Clooney's rancid breath blasted into Shadow's face as he ground out each syllable. Bring that picture back here to me. Do this, and your reward will be great when I sit on the abbot's chair in Redwall Abbey. But fail me, your screams will be heard far beyond the woodland and meadows. Clooney the Scourge had spoken. Right, that was chapter 12. Let me see how long chapter 13 is. We'll do chapter 13, but chapter 13 will have to be the last one for the ending. There is an animated show for this. There is indeed. There is indeed. I haven't watched it yet, though. I wanted to read it again before I watched the show, just because a cartoon is never the same as the book. I must always prefer the book. Chapter 13. The sun's first rays flung wide the gates of dawn. The inhabitants of Redwall were already up and about. After breakfast, the abbot issued daily orders. All those not employed defending the abbey would husband the crops and gather in supplies for the larders in the event of a prolonged siege. Young otters collected watercress and fished. Cornflower headed a party of mice to reap the early cereal crops. More youngsters tended the salad gardens. The bright summer morning hummed to the bustle of industrious woodlanders. Ambrose Spike, now sufficiently recovered, sat in the storeroom taking stock. Lots of nuts and preserved berries from last autumn. Apples and pears aplenty. Unfortunately, the hedgehog could not check the cellars. Brother Edmund and Friar Hugo had the only 2 keys. He licked his lips at the thoughts of barrels of nut brown ale, strong cider, creamy stout, and the little kegs, all the dear little kegs, full of elderberry wine, mulberry brandy, blackcurrant port, and wild grape sherry. Your edge pig, where am I putting these roots and the dandelions? Hasten up, they am right heavy. Ambrose sighed wistfully as he attended the 2 moles staggering under a bundle of dandelions and tubers. Hold 'em little taters steady, Bill. You're tip 'em up, Lego. More baby moles. Ambrose pulled the bandage on his wound. A hedgehog's work was never done. Matthias and Constance stood in the cloisters. They had taken charge of weapon training. The Woodlanders were each showing off their special skills. In more peaceful days, these skills had only been used at fairs and sporting contests. But now, when the need arose, they would be used with more deadly effect. The otters carried bags of smooth pebbles, which they hurled from vine slings with great force and accuracy. Groups of field mouse archers knocked thistledown shafts to the strings of their longbows. A mouse-sized longbow. Many a marauding bird had been driven off by these same tiny archers. Bands of redwall mice practiced at thrust and parry with staves. Below the wall on the abbey grass, Formal directed his crew as they dug a trench. This was lined with sharpened stakes by a solitary beaver. A system of ropes and pulleys carried the baskets of stone and trench debris up to the ramparts. Defenders piled it in heaps at the edge of the parapet. Battle preparations. Matthias took a group of redwall mice to instruct in the use of the quarterstaff. He had discovered in himself a natural skill with the long ash pole. Ash is a type of wood. None of the mice had ever competed in any type of violent sport. They were awkward and timid. But as it was a personal choice between learning cudgel and wrestling from Constance or quarterstaff from Matthias to a mouse, they had opted for the latter. Matthias found he had to be quite severe with them. Accordingly, he dealt out some hefty blows and hard falls to make the more timid souls angry enough to retaliate. "Keep that head guarded, Brother Anthony." Whack! "I warned you, brother. Now look at. I'm coming after you again." Thwack! No, don't just stand there, brother. Defend yourself. Hit out at me." Thwack! Crack! This time Matthias sat down hard, rubbing dazily at his sore head. Constance chuckled. "Well, Matthias, you've only yourself to blame. You asked Brother Anthony to hit out at you, and my word, he certainly obliged. I'll have to recruit him for my cudgel class. He shows promise." Matthias stood up, smiling ruefully. He rested on his own staff. "Yes, he's very strong, but I do wish that we had some real weapons of war, swords and daggers and such like. We won't kill many rats with wooden staves." "Maybe not," the badger replied, "but you must remember that we are here to defend, not to attack or kill." Matthias threw down his staff. He took a dipper of water from an oaken pail, drinking deeply, then splashing the remains over his aching head. "A wise observation, Constance, but you try telling that to Clooney and his horde. See how far you get." Lunch that day was served out in the orchard. Matthias lined up with the other woodland creatures to collect his food. A bowl of fresh milk, a hunk of wheaten loaf, and some goat's milk cheese. Cornflower was serving. She gave Matthias an extra large wedge of the cheese. He rolled up the sleeves of his habit and pulled out the corner of her scarf. "Look, Cornflower, a very close friend gave me this night." She laughed at him. "Get along and eat your lunch, Warrior Mouse, or I'll show you my deadly aim with this piece of cheese." Strolling through the dappled shade of the orchard, Matthias sought out old Methuselah. Slumping down beneath a damson tree, the young mouse munched away at his lunch. Methuselah was sitting with his back against the tree, his eyes closed in an apparent doze. Without opening, he addressed Matthias. "How goes the practiced war, young stave master?" Matthias watched some of the tiny ants carrying off his fallen breadcrumbs as he answered, "As well as possible, Brother Methuselah. And how are your studies coming along?" Methuselah squinted over the top of his spectacles. "Knowledge is a thing that one cannot have enough of. It is the fruit of wisdom, to be eaten carefully and digested fully. Unlike that lunch you are bolting down now, little friend." Matthias set his food to one side. "Tell me, what knowledge have you digested lately, old one?" Methuselah took a sip from Matthias's milk bowl. "Sometimes I think you have a very old head for such a young mouse. What more do you wish to know about Martin the warrior?" Matthias looked surprised. "How did you know I was going to ask about Martin?" Methuselah wrinkled his nose. "How do the bee folk know there is pollen in a flower? Ask away, young one, before I doze off again." Matthias hesitated a moment, then blurted out, "Brother Methuselah, tell me where Martin lies buried." The old mouse chuckled dryly. "Next you are going to ask me where to find the great sword of the warrior mouse." But how did you know that?" stammered Matthias. The ancient gatehouse keeper shrugged his thin shoulders. "The sword must lie buried with Martin. You would have little use for the dusty bones of a bygone hero. A simple deduction, even for one as old as I am." "Then you know where the warrior lies?" Methuselah shook his head. "There is a thing no creature knows. For many long years now, I have puzzled and pored over ancient manuscripts, translating, following hidden trails, always with the same result.
You've been working on the
Nothing.
ultimate Brazilian funk
I've
playlist
even
for
used
days.
my gift
It
of
ebbs and
tongues,
flows.
speaking to the bees and others who can go into places too small for us. But always it is the same. Rumors, legends, and old mouse tales." Matthias crumbled more bread for the ants. "Then the warrior's sword is only a fable?" Methuselah leaned forward indignantly. "Who said that? Did I?" "No, but you—" "Bah! Nothing of the sort, young mouse. Listen carefully to me. I have an uncanny feeling that you may be the one I have been saving this vital piece of information for." Matthias forgot his lunch. He listened attentively. "About 4 summers ago, I treated a sparrowhawk who had pulled a sinew in her foot. She could not use her talons properly. As I remember, I made her promise never to take a mouse as prey. She was a fierce, frightening bird. Have you ever been up close to a sparrowhawk?" "No, of course you haven't. Well, let me tell you, they can hypnotize small creatures with the savage golden eyes. Born killers they are.
But this hawk said something that made me think. She talked of the sparrows, called them winged mice, said that many years ago they had stolen something from our abbey, a treasure that belonged to the mice. Wouldn't say what it was, just flew off. Huh. Who expects gratitude from a sparrowhawk anyway? Matthias interrupted. Have you ever spoken to the sparrows about this something? Methuselah shook his head. I'm too old. I can't climb up to the roof where they nest. Besides, the sparrows are odd birds, forever quarreling and chattering on in their strange voices. They are warlike creatures, extremely forgetful and completely savage. They'd throw you from the roof and kill you before you had a chance to get near the tribal nest. Yes, I'm far too old for that sort of thing. I'm far too old for that sort of thing, Matthias. And anyhow, I'm not too sure that the sparrowhawk story was true. Some birds can be dreadful liars when they have a mind to be. Matthias tried questioning Brother Methuselah further, but the warm sun had worked his magic upon the old gatekeeper as he sat in the orchard, savoring the peace and tranquility of a June afternoon. This time there was no deception. He was genuinely fast asleep. All right, that ends us in chapter 13. I think I have time to do a story time tomorrow. Story time tomorrow will probably be either probably around 6 or 6:30 p.m. Pacific time. Let's see, how many more chapters do we have? The book is kind of divided up into 3 sections, and we are almost to the end of the first section. I think tomorrow may take us there. But yeah, we'll do that tomorrow. Anyway, thank you for joining me. I hope you're enjoying this. If you can, go buy a copy on Kindle and read along with us. That's always fun. My plan is to read all the way through this book, over a series of a couple of sessions. I've been enjoying it. It's kind of family friendly. I wanted something that you could listen to as an adult and maybe let your kids hear too. You wouldn't feel bad about letting them listen to. And then if we enjoy this, maybe we'll do some more books in the series. All right? Anyway, everybody, I know it's strange times. And some of you may feel fearful for your health or your safety or for those of loved ones. You may worry about your job, or you may just miss normal life. We'll get back there. We will get back there. I think the same sun is on its way for us. And it's going to give us a break and respite from some of the harshness of the world. Be good to yourself. Don't be too fearful. Don't be too anxious. Please be good to your neighbors and your friends. If there's someone around you that needs help, please make sure to check on your neighbors, particularly if you have some older neighbors. It may be harder for some people to get out to the grocery store or the pharmacy right now. And so don't forget to check on your neighbors. No one should be alone. Anyway, thank you again for joining me. Good night. God bless you.
These more machines. twisted and evil.
And welcome back to Coach's Jedi Archives, where today I'm opening up our vault, and we are actually going beyond Star Wars, which we will do from time to time. Any great science fiction you can find here. The making of, documentaries, audiobooks, so on and so forth. Primarily we focus on Star Wars, but today I am opening the vault, and we are going to start releasing every Frank Herbert's Dune novel ever. Right here before the new Dune film comes out to us later this year, we are going to get every audiobook in the history of the franchise. I am very excited. It has been relaxed. It has been edited by me for relaxation, so you can sit back and enjoy one of the greatest sci-fi stories ever told. So thank you guys so much for being here. Make sure you hit that sub button and ring that bell for notifications as we open this vault very often. We will see you guys later.
Audio Renaissance presents Dune by Frank Herbert. Read for you by Simon Vance. With John Alleyne, Scott Brick, Kent Broadhurst, Alan Burrows, Orla Cassidy, Jason Culp, David R. Gordon, Jamie Heinlein, Byron Jennings, Patricia Kilgariff, Ilyana Kadushin, Ewan Morton, Scott Sowers, and Oliver Wyman. Book 1. Dune.
A beginning is the time for taking the most delicate care that the balances are correct. This every sister of the Bene Gesserit knows. To begin your study of the life of Muad'Dib, then, take care that you first place him in his time, born in the 57th year of the Padishah Emperor Shaddam IV. And take the most special care that you locate Muad'Dib in his place, the planet Arrakis. Do not be deceived by the fact that he was born on Caladan and lived his first 15 years there. Arrakis, the planet known as Dune, is forever his place. From Manual of Muad'Dib by the Princess Irulan.
In the week before their departure to Arrakis, when all the final scurrying about had reached a nearly unbearable frenzy, an old crone came to visit the mother of the boy, Paul. It was a warm night at Castle Caladan, and the ancient pile of stone that had served the Atreides family as home for 26 generations bore that cooled sweat feeling it acquired before a change in the weather. The old woman was let in by the side door, down the vaulted passage by Paul's room, and she was allowed a moment to peer in at him where he lay in his bed. By the half-light of a dispenser lamp, dimmed and hanging near the floor, the awakened boy could see a bulky female shape at his door, standing one step ahead of his mother. The old woman was a witch shadow, hair like matted spider webs hooded round darkness of features, eyes like glittering jewels.
Is he not small for his age, Jessica?
The Atreides are known to start late getting their growth, Your Reverence.
So I've heard. Yet he's already 15.
Yes, Your Reverence.
He's awake and listening to us. Sly little rascal. But royalty has need of slyness. And if he's really the Kwisatz Haderach, well...
Within the shadows of his bed, Paul held his eyes open to mere slits. Two bird-bright ovals, the eyes of the old woman, seemed to expand and glow as they stared into his.
Sleep well, you sly little rascal. Tomorrow you'll need all your faculties to meet my Gom Jabbar.
And she was gone, pushing his mother out, closing the door with a solid thump. Paul lay awake, wondering, what's a Gom Jabbar? In all the upset during this time of change, the old woman was the strangest thing he had seen. Your Reverence. And the way she called his mother Jessica, like a common serving wench, instead of what she was. A Bene Gesserit lady, a duke's concubine and mother of the ducal heir. Is a Gom Jabbar something of Arrakis I must know before we go there? He wondered. He mouthed her strange words. Gom Jabbar. Kwisatz Haderach. There had been so many things to learn. Arrakis would be a place so different from Caladan that Paul's mind whirled with the new knowledge. Arrakis. Dune. Desert planet. Thufir Hawat, his father's master of assassins, had explained it. Their mortal enemies, the Harkonnens, had been on Arrakis 80 years, holding the planet in quasi-fief under a Chone company contract to mine the geriatric spice, melange. Now the Harkonnens were leaving, to be replaced by the House of Atreides in fief complete, an apparent victory for the Duke Leto. Yet, Hawat had said, this appearance contained the deadliest peril, for the Duke Leto was popular among the great houses of the Landsrot. A popular man arouses the jealousy of the powerful, Hawat had said. Arrakis. Dune. Desert planet. Paul fell asleep to dream of an Arrakeen cavern. Silent people all around him moving in the dim light of glow globes. It was solemn there, like a cathedral, as he listened to a faint sound, the drip, drip, drip of water. Even while he remained in the dream, Paul knew he would remember it upon awakening. He always remembered the dreams that were predictions. The dream faded. Paul awoke to feel himself in the warmth of his bed, thinking. This world of Castle Caladan, without play or companions his own age, perhaps did not deserve sadness in farewell. Dr. Yue, his teacher, had hinted that the Falfreluche's class system was not rigidly guarded on Arrakis. The planet sheltered people who lived at the desert edge without Kaid or Bashat to command them. Will o' the Sand people called Fremen, marked down on no census of the Imperial Regent. Arrakis. Dune. Desert planet. Paul sensed his own tensions and decided to practice one of the mind-body lessons his mother had taught him. 3 quick breaths triggered the responses. He fell into the floating awareness, focusing the consciousness. Aortal dilation. Avoiding the unfocused mechanism of consciousness. To be conscious by choice. Blood enriched and swift, flooding the overload regions, one does not obtain food, safety, freedom by instinct alone. Animal consciousness does not extend beyond the given moment, nor into the idea that its victims may become extinct. The animal destroys and does not produce. Animal pleasures remain close to sensation levels and avoid the perceptual. The human requires a background grid through which to see his universe. Focused consciousness by choice. This forms your grid. Bodily integrity follows nerve, blood flow according to the deepest awareness of cell needs. All things, cells, beings are impermanent. Strive for flow permanence within. Over and over and over, within Paul's floating awareness, the lesson rolled. When dawn touched Paul's windowsill with yellow light, he sensed it through closed eyelids, opened them, hearing then the renewed bustle and hurry in the castle, seeing the familiar patterned beams of his bedroom ceiling. The hall door opened, and his mother peered in, hair like shaded bronze held with black ribbon at the crown, her oval face emotionless, and green eyes staring solemnly.
You're awake. Did you sleep well?
Yes.
He studied the tallness of her. saw the hint of tension in her shoulders as she chose clothing for him from the closet racks. Another might have missed the tension, but she had trained him in the Bene Gesserit way, in the minutiae of observation. She turned, holding a semi-formal jacket for him. It carried the red Atreides hawk crest above the breast pocket.
Hurry and dress. Reverend Mother is waiting.
I dreamed of her once. Who is she?
She was my teacher at the Bene Gesserit school. Now she's the Emperor's truth-sayer. And Paul, you must tell her about your dreams.
I will. Is she the reason we got Arrakis?
We did not get Arrakis.
Jessica flicked dust from a pair of trousers, hung them with the jacket on the dressing stand beside his bed.
Don't keep Reverend Mother waiting.
Paul sat up, hugged his knees.
What's a Gom Jabbar?
Again, the training she had given him exposed her almost invisible hesitation, a nervous betrayal he felt as fear. Jessica crossed to the window, flung wide the draperies, stared across the river orchards toward Mount Siobi.
You'll learn about the Gom Jabbar soon enough.
He heard the fear in her voice and wondered at it. Jessica spoke without turning.
Reverend Mother is waiting in my morning room. Please hurry.
The Reverend Mother Gaius Helen Mohiam sat in a tapestried chair, watching mother and son approach. Windows on each side of her overlooked the curving southern bend of the river and the green farmlands of the Atreides family holding. But the Reverend Mother ignored the view. She was feeling her age this morning, more than a little petulant. She blamed it on space travel and association with that abominable spacing guild and its secretive ways. But here was a mission that required personal attention from a Bene Gesserit with the sight. Even the Padishah Emperor's truthsayer couldn't evade that responsibility when the duty call came. Damn that Jessica, the Reverend Mother thought. If only she'd borne us a girl as she was ordered to do. Jessica stopped 3 paces from the chair, dropped a small curtsy, a gentle flick of left hand along the line of her skirt. Paul gave the short bow his dancing master had taught, the one used when in doubt of another's station. The nuances of Paul's greeting were not lost on the Reverend Mother.
He's a cautious one, Jessica.
Jessica's hand went to Paul's shoulder, tightened there. For a heartbeat, fear pulsed through her palm. Then she had herself under control.
Thus he has been taught, Your Reverence.
What does she fear? Paul wondered. The old woman studied Paul in one gestalten flicker. Face oval like Jessica's, but strong bones. Hair, the Duke's black but with brow line of the maternal grandfather who cannot be named. And that thin, disdainful nose, shape of directly staring green eyes, like the old Duke, the paternal grandfather who is dead. Now, there was a man who appreciated the power of bravura, even in death, the Reverend Mother thought.
Teaching is one thing. The basic ingredient is another. We shall see.
The old eyes darted a hard glance at Jessica.
Leave us. I enjoin you to practice the meditation of peace.
Jessica took her hand from Paul's shoulder.
Your Reverence,
Jessica, you know it must be done.
Paul looked up at his mother, puzzled. Jessica straightened.
Yes, of course.
Paul looked back at the Reverend Mother. Politeness and his mother's obvious awe of this old woman argued caution. Yet he felt an angry apprehension at the fear he sensed radiating from his mother.
Paul, this test you're about to receive, it's important to me.
Test?
He looked up at her.
Remember that you're a Duke's son.
Jessica whirled and strode from the room in a dry swishing of skirt. The door closed solidly behind her. Paul faced the old woman, holding anger in check.
Does one dismiss the Lady Jessica as though she were a serving wench?
A smile flicked the corners of the wrinkled old mouth.
The Lady Jessica was my serving wench, lad, for 14 years at school. And a good one, too. Now you come here.
The command whipped out at him. Paul found himself obeying before he could think about it. Using the voice on me, he thought. He stopped at her gesture, standing beside her knees.
See this?
From the folds of her gown, she lifted a green metal cube about 15 centimeters on a side. She turned it, and Paul saw that one side was open, black and oddly frightening. No light penetrated that open blackness.
Put your right hand in the box.
Fear shot through Paul. He started to back away.
Is this how you obey your mother?
He looked up into bird-bright eyes. Slowly, feeling the compulsions and unable to inhibit them, Paul put his hand into the box. He felt first a sense of cold as the blackness closed around his hand, then slick metal against his fingers, and a prickling as though his hand were asleep. A predatory look filled the old woman's features. She lifted her right hand away from the box and poised the hand close to the side of Paul's neck. He saw a glint of metal there and started to turn toward it.
Stop!
Using the voice again, he swung his attention back to her face.
I hold at your neck the Gomdrabar. The Gomdrabar, the high-handed enemy. It's a needle with a drop of poison on its tip. Aha, don't pull away, or you'll feel that poison.
Paul tried to swallow in a dry throat. He could not take his attention from the seamed old face, the glistening eyes, the pale gums around silvery metal teeth that flashed as she spoke.
A duke's son must know about poisons. It's the way of our times, eh? Musky to be poisoned in your drink. Almas to be poisoned in your food. The quick ones and the slow ones and the ones in between. Here's a new one for you. The Gomdrabar. It kills only animals.
Pride overcame Paul's fear.
You dare suggest a duke's son as an animal?
Let us say I suggest you may be human. Steady. I warn you not to try jerking away. I am old, but my hand can drive this needle into your neck before you escape me.
Who are you? How did you trick my mother into leaving me alone with you? Are you from the Harkonnens?
The Harkonnens? Bless us, no. Now be silent.
A dry finger touched his neck, and he stilled the involuntary urge to leap away.
Good. You passed the first test. Now here's the way of the rest of it. If you withdraw your hand from the box, you die. This is the only rule. Keep your hand in the box and live. Withdraw it and die.
If I call out, there'll be servants on you in seconds and you'll die.
Servants will not pass your mother, who stands guard outside that door. Depend on it. Your mother survived this test. Now it's your turn. Be honored. We seldom administer this to men children.
Curiosity reduced Paul's fear to a manageable level. He heard truth in the old woman's voice, no denying it. If his mother stood guard out there, if this were truly a test, and whatever it was, he knew himself caught in it, trapped by that hand at his neck, the Gomdrabar. He recalled the response from the litany against fear as his mother had taught him out of the Bene Gesserit rite. I must not fear. Fear is the mind killer. Fear is the little death that brings total obliteration. I will face my fear. I will permit it to pass over me and through me. And when it has gone past, I will turn the inner eye to see its path. Where the fear has gone, there will be nothing. Only I will remain. He felt calmness return.
Get on with it, old woman.
Old woman? You've courage, and that can't be denied. Well, we shall see, sirrah. You will feel pain in this hand within the box. Pain. But withdraw the hand, and I'll touch your neck with my Gomdrabar. The death so swift it's like the fall of the headsman's axe. Withdraw your hand, and the Gomdrabar takes you. Understand?
What's in the box?
Pain.
He felt increased tingling in his hand, pressed his lips tightly together. How could this be a test? He wondered. The tingling became an itch.
You've heard of animals chewing off a leg to escape a trap. There's an animal kind of trick. A human would remain in the trap, endure the pain, feigning death that he might kill the trapper and remove a threat to his kind.
The itch became the faintest burning.
Why are you doing this?
To determine if you're human. Be silent.
Paul clenched his left hand into a fist as the burning sensation increased in the other hand. It mounted slowly, heat upon heat upon heat upon heat. He felt the fingernails of his free hand biting the palm. He tried to flex the fingers of the burning hand, but couldn't move them.
It burns!
Silence!
Pain throbbed up his arm. Sweat stood out on his forehead. Every fiber cried out to withdraw the hand from that burning pit. But the Gom Jabbar. Without turning his head, he tried to move his eyes to see that terrible needle poised beside his neck. He sensed that he was breathing in gasps, tried to slow his breaths and couldn't. Pain. His world emptied of everything except that hand immersed in agony, the ancient face inches away staring at him. His lips were so dry he had difficulty separating them. The burning. The burning. He thought he could feel skin curling black on that agonized hand, the flesh crisping and dropping away until only charred bones remained. It stopped. As though a switch had been turned off, the pain stopped. Paul felt his right arm trembling, felt sweat bathing his body.
Enough. Cool Wahad. No woman-child ever withstood that much. I must have wanted you to fail.
She leaned back, withdrawing the Gom Jabbar from the side of his neck.
Take your hand from the box, young human, and look at it.
He fought down an aching shiver, stared at the lightless void where his hand seemed to remain of its own volition. Memory of pain inhibited every movement. Reason told him he would withdraw a blackened stump from that box.
Do it.
He jerked his hand from the box, stared at it, astonished. Not a mark, no sign of agony on the flesh. He held up the hand, turned it, flexed the fingers.
Pain by nerve induction. Can't go around maiming potential humans. There are those who'd give a pretty for the secret of this box, though.
She slipped it into the folds of her gown.
But the pain.
Pain. A human can override any nerve in the body.
Paul felt his left hand aching, uncurled the clenched fingers, looked at 4 bloody marks where fingernails had bitten his palm. He dropped the hand to his side, looked at the old woman.
You did that to my mother once?
Ever sift sand through a screen?
The tangential slash of her question shocked his mind into a higher awareness. Sand through a screen. He nodded.
We Bene Gesserit sift people to find the humans.
He lifted his right hand, willing the memory of the pain.
And that's all there is to it? Pain?
I observed you in pain, lad. Pain's merely the axis of the test. Your mother's told you about our ways of observing. I see the signs of her teaching in you. Our test is crisis and observation.
He heard the confirmation in her voice.
It's truth.
She stared at him. He senses truth. Could he be the one? Could he truly be the one? She extinguished the excitement, reminding herself, hope clouds observation.
You know when people believe what they say.
I know it.
The harmonics of ability confirmed by repeated test were in his voice. She heard them.
Perhaps you are the Kwisatz.